The two girls were discussing how a young gentleman passed by them and smiled at them, and they could not believe their eyes, for Ern had never smiled at them. It was rumored that Ern had been training hard lately. Girls looking at the boys who were training suggested that at such a young age, the young lord was too young to get smart. The boy, who was 16 years old, didn't want Ern Steelguard's tragedy to happen to him again in this life. Ern had previously left his past world and body at the age of 33, after which he found himself reborn in another world. The lad was born into the noble Steelguard family that has ruled northern Navarro for generations. Ern's grandfather, Rebahan Steelguard, was a war hero who stopped the takeover of the Pavar Empire. He was a knight of mythic rank. The guy's father, Rebadan, was just a brilliant knight. Ern's abilities were very weak and could not compare to those of his grandfather and father. He had a simple third knight rank but became an earl and lost everything in just 3 years. People have heard that a lion's pride can give birth to a little dog. People around him treated him carelessly because he lost his title. Ern understood that all their words were true, although he could not compare them with his father. Still, he tried to become at least a good count, but he was screwed and robbed of his order and property. Eventually, he left this world at the hands of mercenaries Kunzi. Kunzi, after all he had taken from Ern, was little. The guy asked what this book of measurements deals with. Surprisingly, it had a lot of blank pages. Ern asked the offender not to touch this book, and the guy asked his captor to shut up and not talk to him. Looking at his assailant, Ern realized that the book of dimensional transactions was not a mere paper, but a family treasure that allowed them to make trade deals with the inhabitants of other dimensions. If he used it correctly, he would raise the family from its knees. The offender pointed out that Ern simply believed the book and gave away all the property, saying that the rumors about him were not false, calling him insane. Ern asked the offender to give him the book, saying that it was his, and he saw something fall out of it. He was very surprised to see that it was a bookmark of wishes. The wishing bookmark is a trinket Ern got in these trades in another dimension. Earlier, the unknown man had said that this bookmark was very expensive, but could fulfill one wish of his life. Ern realized that it was a fraud, not believing that this bookmark could fulfill his wish. Ern wanted to save his family through such deals. Suddenly, his thinking was interrupted by a guy who started to drink an unknown liquid. The guy realized that it was a healing potion that gave temporary recovery. He asked his abuser why he had given him the potion. The unknown man replied that he had been asked to play with him for as long as possible. Stating that he would not simply leave this world, he pulled out torture implements. The abuser reported that Kuntz told him to tell him that this bullying was his last gift. The boy was very angry with his acquaintance Kunzi, who wished him only torment and deceived him, but he could not resist. Ern indicated he was the last of the Steel Guardians and would leave this world as an unwanted dog. Hearing this, the offender assumed that Ern had gone mad at the end, for one cannot endure such a thing in one's own mind. The guy realized that if he hadn't been such a fool, he wouldn't have been treated like this, and the family would have been fine. Ern realized that if he had another chance, he would really want to correct all of his mistakes in this life. The bookmark of wishes heard his words and the will of one facing despair, but, to the end, was not broken. He dreamed of mending this condition that was fulfilled for the fulfillment of the wish. The system asked the guy to say his last wish, but the owner of the wish was unconscious and could not make the wish. After analyzing the owner's wishes based on his memories and finding no slight difference, Ern woke up in a different place, unharmed and rejuvenated. Looking out the window, the guy noticed the same view that he had always observed. He didn't understand how it could be because just now, a mercenary sent by Kuntz had sent him to the other world. Suddenly, from behind the door came the voice of Isel, who asked permission to enter Ern's room. The boy realized that Isel had been his maid, who had cared for him for more than 10 years before. The girl told the young master that Ern's head was waiting for him, and he was surprised to see Isel standing before him. After looking around the room and seeing the jewelry from his memories, he asked the maid how old he was. Isel was surprised at his question, not understanding why he suddenly asked such a thing. He replied that he turned 16 this year. Ern realized that he had really gone back 17 years. Afterward, the guy rushed to hug the maid, who did not understand what was happening to the young master because he had not behaved like this before. Ern asked the girl what she really was. Isel, the maid, noticed tears in the guy's eyes. Not understanding what was happening to him, she assumed the guy was having a nightmare. Isel had believed in Ern in the past. Even when the whole family had lost hope, the guy had expressed his gratitude to her by wiping away his tears. The maid did not understand what had happened to the young gentleman. Being shocked, she assumed it was a new form of harassment. The girl apologized to the guy, saying that if she had done something wrong, he should just tell her because she was ready for any punishment and would certainly correct herself. The young gentleman replied negatively, adding that assuming his past life had been wasted was not the point. Ern remembered how he treated this maid and felt ashamed of his actions. Ern asked Isel why she had come to him and asked her to come to her senses. The maid said that Ern had not been there yesterday either and that the head was angry about it, so he was waiting for him now. The guy replied to the girl that he would go to him now, not realizing where he had put his sword again. Isel was surprised at this answer. Ern asked why she was so surprised by his answer, assuming that he had better not go to this meeting. The maid replied that this was not quite so, and she was not against his decision. The guy didn't know how it happened. Still, he realized he was given another chance to change everything and started to get dressed for the meeting with the head of the Stilgard family. A momentary mistake that destroyed a family and its terrible past is gone now. Ern Stilgard will try like crazy to change the future. After changing his clothes and taking his sword with him, the guy told the maid that he was ready to meet with the head of the department and was glad that he had the opportunity to change everything. Isel continued to be surprised by the young master, who behaved unusually. Meanwhile, on the Stilgard training ground, the knights of which the Stilgards were proud, Ern ensured they were the same. Before, Ern didn't value them and just thought they were sweaty old uncles. He noticed that there were about 70 people there. Knight first rank. Hafiel was the captain of the Stilgard Knights, having asked Ern if he had just shown up for training. The boy apologized to him, assuming he was a little late, realizing that Captain Hafiel's character was the same as in his past life. Hafiel replied that it didn't matter about his lateness. He asked Ern if he hadn't forgotten about his promise, saying that since he wasn't there yesterday, today he would work for 2 days. The knight told the guy that he had to make 50 circles around the field, 1,000 sword swings, and the same number of dodges, saying that this time the guy would not get off so easily. To his surprise, Ern did not object. The young master asked what he could immediately start to fulfill. Hafiel thought that the guy would start scolding again, but Ern's submission surprised him. Ern realized that he had put things off in his previous life, which had put him in a depressing situation. Now he was determined to make things right, and so he had already run 50 laps around the field. The guy realized that everything was back 17 years ago, and only he had changed. Now, everything was in his hands. He knew that about the future of his life, and he decided to become better in any way. Hafiel noticed that the young lord was serious about this training. Meanwhile, the boy made 472 swings of his sword. Ern wanted to stop the attacks that awaited him and protect their family's legacy, but after he made the 1,000th swing of his sword, he fell to the ground. For the first time, the guy fully completed a workout that was very hard for him, realizing that his strengths and weaknesses and the upcoming events forced him to try so hard, realizing that he needed to improve his fitness. Suddenly, the guy received a notification of a new user offering Ern to make a transaction between dimensions. The guy didn't realize what this window system was. Hafiel asked if the guy was in line. Ern asked Hafiel if he could see the system window that opened in front of him. The knight replied that he didn't understand what Ern told him, saying he was pointing at nothing. Hafiel assumed that the young gentleman was beginning to see things because of fatigue, and Ern asked if he could see anything. The boy realized that he was the only one seeing it, but Ern didn't understand why it was floating in the air and not in a book, so he decided to try to make a measurement exchange. Ern accepted the offer the system made to him, and a book appeared in front of him that only he could see. Realizing that this was a real transaction between dimensions, he thought it must be in the form of a book. Unexpectedly, his thoughts were interrupted by the knight Hafiel, who was worried about the young lord behaving strangely. Hafiel asked Ern if he had come to his senses, for he had said something strange, suggesting that he was not well and should see a physician. Ern replied that he was all right, for he was not what he used to be. The knight was surprised at the answer of the lad who sewed with happiness. Hafiel had not noticed such determination in Ern before. The boy said he was done with his training and asked if he could leave the training area. The knight replied that he could rest and bowed to him in farewell. Ern assumed that Raphael couldn't have lied to him, realizing that he had seen the exchange window all too clearly and that it couldn't have been a simple hallucination. The man said hello to Ernie, assuming that he had just come from training, and asked if he wanted to make him something to eat. The guy said he didn't want to, realizing that the butler couldn't see the system window either. The butler noticed a strange blue flame from the young lord's eye. When he informed Ern about it, the boy was surprised by his words, assuming that the book of measurement transactions was right in his eye. The boy replied that this is how mana is displayed, stating that there was nothing wrong with it. The butler was surprised at this excuse. Ern informed the man that he intended to go rest. Left alone, the guy realized it was all right in front of his eyes, acknowledging those around him didn't see what was available. Ern had difficulty believing he had returned to another world 17 years later. In a relieved exhale, the guy was pleased that the butler hadn't noticed anything. Suddenly, the guy received a notification asking if he was ready to continue bidding under this account with the nickname Ern. The guy was surprised that there was no eject button, and seeing his old ID, he accepted the offer. Then, a transaction through the dimensions began to take place, reporting that he had 0 transactions, and the status of a normal person on his account was 10 coins. Ern realized that everything had started from scratch when he saw that supply and demand were not the same. He realized that there was nothing he could do about it because he was in the heat of the system. The guy did not understand where he got 10 coins, assuming that it was his past account. Still, the transaction level was unsuitable because he had a second level in his past life when he did not understand anything. A week later, Raphael asked what Ern wanted to spar with the knight, trying to ensure the young lord was serious. Ern nodded positively. Raphael asked Fry to keep Mr. Ern company, asking him to use only his left hand and without mana. The knight knew that despite his hard training, it was too early for him to spar with a real knight. Ern realized that Fry was a 6th-ranked knight, assuming that Raphael considered him weak. He asked Fry not to listen to the captain and just put his best foot forward. Fry was surprised at such a request from Mr. Ern, who was ready for them to spar together, and stated that it was time for them to begin. Suddenly, the knight was surprised by the man's lightning sword strike on his opponent. Fry was surprised by the man's aggression because he thought to treat him more gently, but the speed of the attack and Ern's sword technique were all expected. The surrounding people were surprised at such a heated battle because the young lord was crowding Fry. The knight assumed that his strength had weakened since Ern managed to crowd him. After another strike, Frey used mana, and a bright flash blinded everyone on the training field. The knights were shocked by what they saw. They couldn't believe the young lord could withstand this attack. Ern asked Frey, who had fallen to the ground. He had won in this sparring. The guy was satisfied that he had managed to defeat this knight. Frey pointed out that he had used magic and didn't understand how he could lose to him. The guy asked his opponent to simply admit defeat. The people around him couldn't believe that the young lord had defeated a 6th-ranked knight who used magic. A week earlier, Ern was satisfied that all the money he had received for the deal was in his hands. The guy knew that he would not be cheated this time, so he decided to spend it all properly. The most important way was the transactions between dimensions. Ern decided to see how things were going on the trading exchange because the most important thing now was the exchange he wanted to do. After he provided 30 coins, the system reported that he could make an exchange. He expected to receive 25 coins. After he started making transactions between dimensions, he realized the main rule. The rule stated that depending on the market situation, the value of goods changes. In every world, goods have different values, and to maximize profit, it is best to buy cheaply and sell expensively. However, certain goods have taxes and commissions on the exchange, and the lower the level of the transaction, the more restrictions on the exchange. Ern knew that to level up, there had to be real results, and to get real results, there had to be a high level. Finding a normal item at level 0 was like getting a star from the sky. Suddenly, the guy noticed Heartstone selling small and medium mana stones. Ern wrote to the man who said his mine produced excellent quality stones. Ern didn't understand why his name was glowing red. The guy decided to click on the red name of his interlocutor, who offered to buy mana stones. A user information window popped up indicating that Heartstone is an entrepreneur who uses slave labor to mine the mine and is willing to do anything for profit. Ern decided to first find out the price in this channel. The average price for a small mana stone was 3 coins, and for a medium, 12 coins. Realizing that if the information was true, the seller wanted twice as much money, Ern said that the price was market price. The guy asked Heartstone how to sell stones for overprice, realizing he was a scammer. The seller pointed out that his price is relatively low, asking on what basis he says. So the guy said that the exchange would explain everything to him. Ern noticed that the seller was confused. He assumed that what he saw in the information window about the seller was true because the exchange could sanction Heartstone for the wrong price. The seller replied that the profitability of the mines has fallen, and the workers are also asking for wages. He stated that after paying the workers, he himself would have nothing left, and therefore he wanted to cheat him. Ern realized that the salesman was fooling him again and asked what wages the slaves could ask for. The salesman said that he was going to file a complaint against him. Heartstone asked him not to do that and offered him the stones at half price. The guy thought about the vendor's offer, assuming that Heartstone might still move, and decided to try to lower the price of the mana stones, but decided not to do so as not to get a complaint. Then he began the deal with Heartstone, who gave him 2 small stones and 2 medium stones. In return, Ern gave him 25 coins. After both guys accepted the deal, suddenly, Ern noticed that he would pay 22.5 coins for the deal. The seller's information and the transaction report appeared, and even though the number of coins in the transaction decreased, Ern decided not to report the seller for a while and kept him on the hook. The guy was surprised by the applied cashback, realizing that it is a privilege only for VIP clients, assuming that it can't be, so why would he be a VIP client? After the transaction, Ern decided to taste the stone's mana as he absorbed it and felt the mana flow, realizing that the seller had not slipped him a fake. For several days, Ern Steelguard had been diligently studying the special mana-breathing technique of the family that his grandfather had once perfected. In order to master the breath of steel, 2 conditions had to be met. At first, it was impossible for Ern, who didn't possess anything, but he obtained the former through endless effort and training, and the latter thanks to the mana stones he bought. Ern succeeded in mastering the breath of steel and won a glorious victory over Knight Frey. Some of the crowd assumed it was a staged training session, saying that Frey could play along when needed. Ern decided to prove his strength once again. The young gentleman offered Michael to compete with him. The guy asked the guy what it was he was addressing him. This night was perfect for Ern to demonstrate his abilities. Suddenly, a girl intervened in their conversation and said it would be exciting to watch. Rebidon Steelguard's eldest daughter, Karen Steelguard, approached them, intent on observing what was happening. Hafael told Mistress that the young master was unprepared for such a fight. Karen replied that she understood what he was worried about. The girl stated that if the knight was worried about the state of his mana offering in return for simply holding a sword fight, Hafael did not object to Mistress Karen. Michael was a knight of the 6th rank. In a normal sword fight comparable to the 5th rank, the man understood that the most important thing in such a fight was distance, assuming that the young lord had no chance of winning. Unexpectedly, Ern began to push Michael, who, according to the beliefs of those around him, was more potent than the guy. Michael tried to counter the guy's pressure by putting blocks, but Ern kept attacking his partner, who could not do anything against him. Hafael could not believe his eyes, for only a few days ago, the wind blew young Mr. Ern about. Ern also managed to win this fight. The other knights were shocked that Michael had lost dryly, but then they began to admire the young lord and his strength. Karen came closer and whispered to her brother that he was good for her and that she had thought badly of him all this time. The boy had not expected such a confession from his older sister, which pleased him. Rebidon regretted every time Karen was born a girl. She could not master the breath of steel that was only passed on to the men of Steelguard, but her talent was visible to the naked eye. Steel breath is the root and foundation of the Steelguard family. It was only passed down through the male line, and no girl in the family could master it, so Karen understood more than anyone the value of Ern's days of silent training. The sister praised the younger brother, who tried to accomplish this in secret from everyone whom no one would see. Karen apologized to Ern for underestimating him because she was his older sister who didn't support him and judged him like everyone else. The boy's conscience was gnawing at him because it was really just to get his older sister's recognition. Hafael asked Ern if he wanted to fight again. Ern realized that Karen, of all the siblings, was the person who could see the situation most clearly without prejudice. Being full of virtue and insight, Ern realized that he had no other way to change things. A little while later, the Steelguard family had dinner at the table. Ern realized that everything was going as planned so far, but he didn't understand what would happen next. The head of the household, Stilgard Rebidon, told all present that he was feeling particularly excellent today. Karen said she had asked the kitchen servants to prepare this dish for them because Ern would be leaving for the academy soon. Rebidon marveled at how his youngest son had matured lately. Ern had thought that as soon as he brought his sister's attention to himself, she would start taking care of him immediately. The head of the household told his son that Karen had told him about his victories among the knights in training Ern, who realized that his plan had worked. For the first time in a long time, a father finally took an interest in his youngest son. Ern realized he should not miss this chance, saying he was not good enough to defeat the knight because it was a small sword fight. The father was surprised at his youngest son's words. Hearing that he had fought a 6th-ranked knight made him even more interested. Eldest son Kieran added that in the duel, the knights did not use magic against Ern, who was trying to make his younger brother look weak. Ern was surprised that his older brother had so lewdly interfered in their conversation with his father, trying to make him look like a loser. Karen pointed out to Kieran that he too had become a knight of the 5th rank only at 18, summarizing that Ernu was still only 16. Kieran replied that it was winter and he was 17, and then he officially got the rank. Rebidon praised his youngest son, calling him a good boy, realizing he was beginning to try harder in his achievements. Rising, his father informed him that his grandfather had first entered the battlefield at 16, asking if Ern had any reason for his sudden change of mind. The father walked over to his youngest son and extended his hand. Ern assumed his father wanted to shake his hand. Ern replied to the head of the Steelguard family that he was already 16 and shook his father's firm hand. The combat handshake is a competitive action in which people pass mana through each other's hands. Ern was surprised by his father's act. Ern assumed that the combat handshake was some sort of test, realizing that it was vital for him to please his father and deciding that he should hide all skills above the 3rd rank to avoid suspicion. The father pointed out to his son that he had grown noticeably, adding that he had been worried that his youngest was a troublemaker, but now he could relax a little. Kieran watched his father with envy as he praised his younger brother, having heard that his father thought Eren would do well outside Steelguard's walls. It seemed to the father that he had paid too little attention to his younger son, realizing that he had come to his senses too late. Rebidon said that Ern could ask him for something as a gift when he entered the academy, and he was pleased that he had managed to win his father's attention. Ern decided to ask his father for something, but afterward, he realized it seemed too much for him. Rebidon told his son not to worry and promised to listen to him. The guy indicated he didn't want to ask for something too global, being sure the request would be denied. His father said he didn't know their youngest son could also control people's souls, and added that he would give him an oath to fulfill his request. Rebidon, as head of the Steelguard family, has sworn a mana oath that he will not break his promise and will do whatever his abilities allow him to do to fulfill the request that his son, Eren Steelguard, voices, stating that he is willing to listen to him. The younger son informed his father of his request. Hearing his younger brother's request, Kieran told his father that it was impossible. Kieran told Ern that he was crazy to ask such a thing from his father, because it was impossible to break the family traditions. The eldest son asked his father if anyone but the head could enter the treasury. He did not understand what visit Ern was asking about. His father replied that the right to enter the treasury belonged entirely to the head of the family, saying that he had also entered the treasury with his father. Kieran pointed out to his father that this was a different case. Rebidon asked his eldest son if he should break his oath of mana in such a case. The eldest son nodded negatively, and his father asked him to leave them alone, for he and Ern would go to their family's treasury. Ern was pleased that his elder brother had been subdued. Kieran realized that Ern wanted the right to enter the treasury, which he didn't have, and he was angry with his younger brother. When he opened the doors, his father pointed out that he could only enter the outer treasury, asking him not to go inside and that he could take any item but one. Rebidon gave him enough time to choose an item calmly and deliberately. Ern intended to give his son-in-law a real book of measurements, for this book was his strongest weapon. To ensure that nothing threatened his new life, this book should be owned only by him. The boy realized that before his past exodus over the last 100 years, the only two traders from the land of 1,342 were Grandpa Rebahan and him. The difference from his past life was that he could see transactions in other dimensions in his eye, which meant the real book was still stored in the treasury, which is why he wanted attention from his father. Ern went to one of the shelves and realized the book must be somewhere, but it was not in the chests. The guy continued to pierce through the treasury, realizing that he couldn't have this book found by someone else because he had to destroy the actual book of dimensional transactions. The father asked his son if he had chosen one of the treasury items. Ern responded positively. When Rebidon saw that his youngest son had chosen a hero figure, his father was surprised by his choice. The figure of the hero exceeded 1,000 gold coins at the rate of the state in which the Stilgard family lived, a fact that is easier to see in the treasury than all the others. The father didn't understand why his youngest son's eye fell on this particular figurine, which was just a momentary gain. He asked Ern if he had entered the treasury just to score gold. The boy understood what his father was thinking. He replied that this figurine was the most valuable thing for him because, thanks to it, he could buy a sword and a mana stone and still have money left over. His father advised him not to spend this time buying and selling things, but to train his youngest son hard because he was still not strong enough. The younger son replied to his father that it was not always the way only one Rebidon reflected on the words he heard from his son. Ern agreed with his father's words, adding that if he had an innate talent for the sword, he was wasting his time, as his father had said, after the guy suggested that this option might be the fastest way for him to reach his goals. His father scratched the back of his head. He replied that his youngest son was not easy to understand, and Ern was glad he had persuaded his father to take the figure for himself. Sometime before, Ern had noticed something strange in the treasury that shocked him. Going to the shelf where there should have been a book of measurement deals, he didn't find it there. He didn't understand where it could have disappeared, so the guy decided to look for it in other places, but his attempts were unsuccessful. After spending some time looking for the book he needed, Ern realized that it was not in the treasury. Ern came up with two hypotheses about what had happened. One implied that he hadn't seen the book move elsewhere, and the other implied that someone was now using the book of measurement transactions. However, neither hypothesis can be confirmed at the moment. The guy did the math and realized that if he counted from the moment he became an earl, he would have to wait another 14 years. Ern had no idea what had happened to the book in his past life, and he realized that he could only hope that the book of transactions would never fall into anyone's hands. It was an outstanding achievement to learn that the book of dimensional transactions was not in the treasury now, so Ern grabbed the first thing that came to hand, knowing that the hero figurine could fetch good money. Ern realized that he had privileges he had discovered during the Hearthstone deal that made his head spin, and a cashback effect on merchandise purchases was available. The guy remembered seeing the name of this effect somewhere and realized that it was the privilege of VIP clients, but it continued to seem impossible to him. Ern decided to try this effect because he had heard rumors that if there was nothing in the VIP category, he was not a VIP customer. A bigger window opened in front of the guy's face, and all the items were of the maximum level. Ern couldn't even imagine such a thing. Suddenly, the guy realized that earlier, he had been given more money for the exchange, and 0 commission was the maximum level allowed to carry out all transactions with 0 commission. An item called the Eye of Providence provided information about the seller and a report on the transaction. Recognizing the flow allowed us to know the quantity of goods and the actual price. A counting skill that made his head spin returned 15% of the transaction. Ern began his transactions due to the privilege of presence that gave him his first 10 coins. The guy was pleased with such privileges, realizing that in such a case, he could make mountains, realizing that everything would happen faster than he thought. Ern realized it was time for revenge, realizing he was already prepared for the upcoming battle. The guy starts getting coins from the hero figurine and applies the effect by putting the figurine on a magic scale. The scales showed a value of 115 coins. Ern assumed this figurine was worth more, knowing its price was at least 150 coins. After Ern activated the VIP stream recognition privilege, the system reported that, according to the Zero World's estimation, this figurine was worth 150 coins. The item was suitable for exchange in the Zero World. After taking the figurine, the guy did not understand why the stock exchange employees had shared 40 coins of value because 40 can be equal to 400 gold coins. The guy was lazy, but he knew he had to make some kind of deal, although he was comfortable enough to make deals lying down because the book of measurements was in his eye. Rising up, the guy realized that the book of measurement deals was now in front of his eyes. Ern assumed that the book he had in his eye was the actual book on measurement transactions. The guy decided that, in this case, he could walk without glasses. As he began to finalize the deal on the figurine, the guy was surprised at the quick sale of this item. Ern didn't know his next item, deciding to stock up on mana stones first. After clicking on the stone seller's profile, Ern realized that the seller would agree to his offer, because he could file a complaint against him. The man didn't understand why this guy dared to call him a fraud. The man didn't know this guy, which was very surprising. Ern asked Heartstone to sell him the mana stones at the old price. Heartstone replied that there was a special concession at that time, and this time he couldn't sell them to him. Ern asked him not to cheat, adding that their past dialogue was preserved. The man realized that he would get a temporary lockout from his complaint, but the losses for those few days would be high, so he decided that it would be easier to sell it to him for less. The guy pointed out that he didn't understand how someone with 10,000 coins could be so petty. Heartstone didn't understand what this guy wanted, so he asked Ern how many mana stones he wanted to buy from him this time. Ern purchased medium stones at 10 coins apiece and small stones at 2.5 coins apiece, for 25 medium rocks and 20 small rocks. After the guy put up an ad selling medium stones for 12 coins and small stones for 3 coins, he took a nap until all the stones were sold. Meanwhile, in the Heartstone room, a man drops his bong on the floor he saw on the exchange. Heartstone was shocked because he had sold Ern the stones for cheap and put them up for more. In his world, he resented the guy who had uploaded his ad to the same channel where he had bought them. When the guy woke up, he didn't understand why he had received so many messages. He noticed that all the messages were from Heartstone because after 3 years of trading, the guy had learned something. Ern knew what to do if the interlocutor raised his voice because he couldn't get through the wall of measurements to him anyway. Raising his head twice as much, Ern replied to Heartstone that he was a bad, angry businessman, asking why on earth he thought he could yell at him. The man was surprised to hear the lad speak. Ern asked why he had fallen silent, assuming he was frightened by his swearing. Once, in a past life, Ern clashed with an unyielding salesman, and his particular manner of speech forever seared his soul, confident that he was not human but something from Azeroth. After realizing this customer was unexpected, Heartstone asked the guy if he could stop screaming. The guy stopped yelling. The salesman pointed out to him that in any case, his behavior was too. Ern replied that if he had promised Heartstone he wouldn't trade them, then maybe it wasn't fair. The seller replied that it was rude to sell at an undervalued price. If he was selling at the same price, Ern pointed out that it was because he was selling them too expensive. Heartstone told the guy that he would no longer sell to him at that price. After this dialogue, the guy realizes that this salesman is too touchy since he doesn't want to trade with him anymore. Ern realized that for guys like Heartstone, money is religion and faith. If the right appetite is whetted, they quickly realize that there are things more important than emotions, and they are willing to do anything to benefit. Heartstone realized that such a distinguished person like him should not allow emotions to interfere with the man. He asked at what price he would buy from him. Ern replied that at which price he was selling. Now Ern had 455 coins, and he could spend 30% more, increasing to 657 coins. The guy was ready to buy 50 medium mana and 19 small stones. Still, Heartstone replied that he only had 25 medium and 50 small stones in stock. Ern agreed to this amount of mana stones, realizing he would also benefit from this deal. Seeing that Ern had put the small stones for sale for 2.5 coins and the medium stones for 11 coins, Heartstone was furious, not understanding why this guy was reselling his stones so cheaply. The guy realized that if you look at it from the side of a normal customer, Heartstone says everything right. But for VIP customers, the story changes because, for him, there was zero commission on bidding. Ern knew that if he lowered the price by 25%, he would still be on the plus side of those sales. In addition to high demand, mana stones had one more advantage. The restrictions on the sale were very complimentary. Disconnecting from his conversation with Heartstone, Ern realized he had little time to make money and therefore had no reason to chat with him. The guy looked at the mana stones on the table and decided to absorb the mana from them to become stronger since he had little time. Now that he had an incredible body, he would be fine wherever he went because he could stand up for himself. Still, so far, Ern was only quick with the essential requirements. Ern realized that he wasn't a genius like his grandfather, and that he would have flaws and stagnation if things stayed the same. If Ern Steelguard went up there, he wouldn't be able to survive with his current strength and skills, so he needed to keep growing. The guy knew he had little time left before going there, realizing that it was generally time for reckoning. Ern decided to lower the price of medium stones to 9.5 coins. Many deals fell through because of this, but he was pleased that he was able to realize his plan. In his previous life, Ern had to give up the entire first year of the county for the sake of going there. But in this life, only 8 days had passed since he started making transactions through the dimensions. It took Ern a year to own Steelguard, but now he has managed to make the multiple transactions necessary to level up. The guy fulfilled the necessary conditions, and his deal level increased. Now he can enter the channel of the first level. Ern used to move to the new system. Once he managed to move to the first system, he received congratulations. The skill sponge inside the head was unlocked, and the skill mastering speed was increased. System 1, where even errand boys and restaurant workers become as strong as knights. Otherwise, this system is called the World of Muram. Eren noticed the announcement of Tu Hue, who had received God's indulgence and obtained his world. However, he did not possess artistic tools and wanted to acquire them at an appropriate price. Everyone reacted negatively to his analogy of acquiring a sword. When the guy was notified of the side effect of absorbing the sponge inside his head, he didn't know what it took to unlock privileges in this world, realizing there was only one thing he could do. Ern ordered the system to activate an epiphany window that showed information about who he was trading with and the exchange center report. The guy was surprised that the epiphany window didn't go off, realizing that the guys at the center of the system were useless. Ern realized that these guys should at least tell him why he was privileged, or let him see the reason through the eye of insight. After some thought, Ern realized that he could figure it out himself by assuming that they opened with level up. The guy received a notice of a special sale this week. He was selling special scrolls of various martial arts with no commission for an hour. If he exchanged 10 coins, he would receive 1 as a gift. The guy thought it was too strange for such spontaneous actions and events. Ern realized that even if it was a special sale, the discounts were based on the market price and would be expensive anyway. Because of his privilege level, the lack of commission didn't matter. Suddenly, the guy was congratulated for going to the #1 exchange center, and the system rewarded him for it by giving him 3 coupons that he could use at the center. The guy assumed it was a customer care service that gave him some kind of cheapie as a reward. Eren received a Dantian image item, 3 years of internal energy martial art, maximum body and sword stealth, and 500 coins. The guy was surprised at the resulting maximum body and sword stealth, not realizing what he was hearing about for the first time. The skill sponge in the head absorbed effect side effects. Absorption was reduced by 80%, and absorption speed increased by 300%. The guy realized that the truth about martial arts was absorbed by the sponge skill in his head. He thought it was impossible. Ern realized that this meant that the martial arts of this world used mana as fuel, but in System 1, they used internal energy. The mana crystals and the item image of Dantian, 3 years of internal energy, had similar actions in this world. If someone were to ask Ern what is better, he would say that martial arts are in System 1. The strange sword symbolized Lezakon and seemed like the mysterious blade technique was from the martial arts world. Martial arts are similar in that they utilize the power of nature, but mana is in a more natural state, and internal energy is a refined version of mana. This privilege is compatible with poison. You still need to open your meridians and veins. The guy realized that in such a case, the skill becomes more refined than anything else similar. Suddenly, his body was filled with unknown forces, similar to the mana of the other world, and his eyes began to glow with red light. Eren realized that he had instantly created a Dantian and learned an entire sword technique. This was more amazing than he could have imagined. The guy was curious if there was any limit to this spatial trade because he didn't know about it. Eren realized that he could buy anything if he had money, even abstract values. Concluding that he needed to be careful when using coins, he decided to go to his first goal. The merchant of the spatial exchange, Mu Hyoja Manor, adored the customer and pointed out that there was no need to talk to him so rudely. The merchant assumed that he was of a different species. The man asked the buyer to think of it as a love of the human species rather than a love of measurement. The buyer replied that he wanted martial arts scrolls and asked to be shown the assortment. The seller replied that he sells a lot of things. After asking the buyer to refrain from such non-formalities, the buyer suggested that he also communicate like that. The man realized he had gotten another lousy customer who refused to listen to him. The seller assumed the customer was from a small bipod lower system. The seller realized that he could not complain because he lived at their expense, thinking that he should thank such buyers. A man asked the buyer what martial arts he was interested in. The buyer wanted sword techniques. The seller replied that he had some of them, including triple sword techniques, balance techniques, and sneaking tigers. Ern had listened to the salesman many times, but could not understand this rogue Muhyoja's strange manner of speech, knowing that his specialty was selling random, cheap, overpriced scrolls. The scammer reported that the triple sword technique is an unfathomable technique that contains all sword techniques. If one succeeds in mastering it, then the buyer can become the strongest in the world. He chose the people of System Zero and deceived them. Ern realized this rogue chose people like him who were real wimps in their past lives. The guy realized it was a deception again because the triple sword technique was a typical technique containing 3 stabbing, slashing, and blocking movements. Ern was sure that it would be helpful if it was used by the strongest in the world. The salesman added that he had other techniques, such as penetration, punching, and many others. Ern did not answer him, so the salesman gave him tips if he paid him 20 coins. Ern agreed, realizing he was deliberately going along with his ruse to benefit himself by learning that his real name was Hakchol Lee. Meanwhile, a servant was trying to communicate something to his leader in the 5th world of Murima in the mountain bamboo sector. Ju Seong-ha asked the servant if they had managed to find this rogue named Hakchol Lee. The leader of the mountain bamboo sect asked his subordinates how they found the rogue and what source they used. The manager of the spatial trading sect replied to the guy that he also had a lot of questions and couldn't answer them all at once. Ern replied that Hakchol Lee was upset right now. He added that if he took care of their enemy, they would owe him a reward, asking if they agreed to such an arrangement. Yu Seong-ha replied to the guy that he wouldn't be able to gain his trust with sweet words by asking what if he was a common scammer. The guy replied that it would be terrible if they didn't believe him because Hakchol Lee was their enemy, not his, and he'd just put him down. The cult leader asked the guy he called to mess with him. He was angry at the guy who was trying to use this situation to benefit himself. Ern replied negatively, adding that Ju Seong-ha should realize this by looking at his information. Ju Seong-ha saw that the guy came from the lower system, and he calmed down from that. The guy replied that everything was correct, asking how he thought he knew the secrets of their book of techniques. The sect leader assumed that Hakchol Lee had told him about it, suggesting that he too trades in this dimension. Ern suggested that a book of measurement deals is the best backup for a fugitive like Hakchol Lee. The guy received 200 coins from the mountain bamboo sect leader and asked Ern if it was enough for him. The guy fell silent. Ju Seong-ha suggested it was too little for him to ask to enter his position. Ern actually just wanted to return the 20 coins he had given to Hakchol Lee, realizing that no one would know that those 20 coins had become a point of no return for Hakchol Lee. Ju Seong-ha said that the guy should not think of cheating because he cannot hide from him, but if he catches Hakchol Lee, he will get more than he has now. The guy was surprised by an unexpected fortune that came to him at such a moment. He was ready to take on the case, but his reason for going to the Din system was Seok-hyun, the seller of martial arts scrolls. Seok-hyun became the harbinger of the Steelguard family's demise. Ern met the guy while he was searching for martial arts scrolls to carry on his grandfather's legacy. He tricked him into spending money needlessly. The Steelguard family finally fell when Ern bought a wishing tab from the man in System Number 2, but that didn't take away his grudge against Seok-hyun. Given the shame and pain the guy had to endure, he was sure he could Seoku Yunu to get him back. Ern managed to approach him. Seok-hyun learned that he had come to him from Mu Hyukja, assuming he knew much about him. The guy was sure that this man usually cheated people from low systems, because Hakchol Lee had copied the information from the scrolls, stolen them, and sold them at a high price to strangers. The man was curious when Hakchol Lee would stop this bad habit of selling copied scrolls at inflated prices, only to those from System Zero. Ern asked Seok-hyun if he was different from Hakchol Lee after all. The man replied that it was rude to compare him to Hakchol Lee, asking the buyer not to go overboard. The guy mocking the scammer apologized for his rudeness by asking him to show the assortment, saying he was looking for sword techniques. Seok-hyun was surprised at such a request. After looking at his inventory, he offered the buyer something suitable. The Plum Blossom technique is a secret art book that exudes a pleasant fragrance. The higher the skill, the deeper the scent. The seller asked Ern how to use this technique. The guy realized that this was not a bad technique. When asked what the price was, the seller said that it was the market price of 50 coins, but he was ready to sell for 35. However, Ern knew that the real price was 15 coins. Ern realized that if Muhyoja was selling a triple technique that wasn't even worth half a coin for 5, then Seok-hyun raised the price by 20 coins. The seller asked the guy why he wasn't answering. The guy decided to teach the scammer a lesson. He replied that he was ready to take it for $35 because it was not that much, asking the seller to make the exchange immediately. Seok-hyun was pleased, assuming that this guy was rich and had a keen eye for technology, and asked the buyer how he made his money. The guy replied that he also works in the business and plans to meet with him often. Seok-hyun was confident he could fool this buyer, who didn't even know this technique's market price and grade. After the seller said that he always welcomed such customers and offered Ern to become friends, he decided to deceive him further. Ern accepted Seok-hyun's friend request, knowing that he could resell this technique even if he lost a little. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. A female voice announced that it was Izel. The guy let her come in. The maid apologized for his unexpected visit, after which she was surprised to see his red eye. The guy realized his thirst for revenge had gotten out, and he couldn't control it after meeting Seok-hyun. Ern came to his senses and told the maid she wasn't guilty. The maid asked if the young gentleman wanted something because he had missed the morning workout. The guy replied that he was in great condition. Izel noticed the guy had progressed a lot these past few days. Suddenly her face turned red. The guy wondered why the maid was blushing at the sight of him. Ern assumed the girl saw him as a real man, but he hadn't even unlocked half of his potential, and she was already looking at him like that. The guy asked the maid to be uninhibited and ask him whatever she wanted. The girl said that she had come to see him about the matter with young Master Kieran this morning. Ern remembered that he had also dealt with his older brother in his previous life. In the morning, the two brothers of the Steelguard family met on the training ground. Ern was surprised to see his older brother, not expecting to find him here, though he had guessed what would happen. The younger brother asked Kieran what brought him to the training ground. He doesn't usually train with knights because their skills are nothing compared to his older brothers, and Ern asked why he thought so. Ern replied that anyone would realize this at a glance. Since he didn't show up on the training ground but instead practiced in a corner by himself, Ern assumed that his older brother was still a child. The older brother was enraged to hear the younger brother say such things, suggesting that he was crazy to say such things to him. Ern apologized to his older brother, pointing out that he was just making a bad joke and shouldn't take it so literally. Kieran swung around and said he would start by teaching his younger brother how to behave around his elders. Dodging Ern suggested that his older brother's behavior was too disrespectful. Ern tried to understand what Kieran could be upset about, but he was ready to keep dodging his blows. Kieran pointed out to his younger brother that he was asking to get punched by him. The older brother swung around and declared that Ern shouldn't think he was better than him just because his father praised him. Suddenly, Ern struck back at his older brother, and their fists clashed in one mighty blow. Kieran recoiled from the blow, not understanding where this power came from, thinking that his younger brother must be a simple knight of the 5th rank. The elder brother realized that he had let his guard down and stated to Ern that he would no longer hold back his strength. This was the true beginning of the mana enhancement technique and a basic requirement for a 2nd-ranked knight. The younger brother saw his aura and didn't understand why he would go so far in his grievances since he was still pretending to be a rank 5 knight. Ern realized he couldn't use his aura to retaliate by telling his older brother that he was out of line. Kieran replied that he would take this opportunity to teach his younger brother a real combat lesson. Ern noticed his older brother started attacking him with all his strength. The younger brother realized that he had no choice and would have to fight him at full strength, so he got into a fighting stance and prepared to strike. Ern used a rock-shattering blow, their blows once again intertwined into one, after which there was a bright flash. Kieran didn't expect such strength from his younger brother and didn't understand why it happened. He didn't understand how Ern could be so strong. The younger brother managed to temper the older brother's fervor with his powerful punch, and a crater formed in the ground where they had struck. Kieran asked his younger brother how quickly he had become so strong. Ern replied that he couldn't answer that question. He felt that Kieran had gone too far in this battle by exposing his aura. Kieran asked his younger brother if he could use the power of the secret vault he had gotten from the vault. Ern realized that his brother was upset that he had entered the secret vault and replied that Kieran should have been there, if not in the inner vault, then at least in the outer vault. Kieran asked what this outdoor vault was, assuming Ern was messing with him since his younger brother was the only other person who went in there besides his father. Ern assumed that his father didn't know about the existence of the book of measurement transactions in his past life, and he hadn't used it either. so the likelihood of someone actually using the book was slim. Since Ern would never be in the inner vault, he had two options. Either she was in the inner vault, or she didn't exist at all. His musings were interrupted by a maid. The guy reported that nothing much happened between him and his older brother. He just asked him to show him his aura, but Kieran lost control of his power in the process. Isel asked if the young lord was hurt, for she could bandage him up if he wanted. Seeing the naked body of the guy, the girl noticed that the young gentleman had already matured, assuming that he would not like her idea. The guy assured them he was perfectly fine, thanking the maid for her concern. He took a pill from the medicine cabinet. Ern realized he was lucky because Kieran didn't give him a hard time about it and asked the maid not to worry about him, saying that she could go and rest. The maid didn't mind and left the guy. Ern knew that now he had to find a way to the inner vault. He wanted to get there before he entered the academy. Ern realized that it was time for the very incident he had planned. Meanwhile, in his room, Kieran couldn't believe that his little brother possessed such a powerful force. Rebadan's second daughter, Darren Stilgard, suggested that her brother had embarrassed himself by losing to Junior. The boy said that Ern was obviously hiding something, suggesting that he was pretending to be weak until then. His sister replied that his younger brother had seemed like a bear to Kieran, but turned out to be a cunning fox. The sister added that despite this, Ern was still a straightforward child. He had not revealed his true nature because he was tired of enduring Kieran's barbs. The brother replied that Ern had not used all his power because he felt he was holding it back. Darian pointed out that even if that was true, it was more likely that Ern was just a foxier vixen than Kieran. The boy replied that he was not a fox, but a leopard. After a little thought, he added that Ern might turn out to be a real tiger. Kieran told his sister to find out what Junior was hiding from them and what he planned to do next. The girl agreed with him, assuring her brother he could grant her this action. Darian assured that she could get to the last detail of their little brother's secrets. Meanwhile, a protest broke out in the Monostone Merchant Alliance because Ern was selling the stones at low prices. Heartstone asked everyone to stop chatting. Heartstone assured them there was no reason for them to fight since their common enemy was Ern, suggesting that they all create a plan to eliminate the guy who had dropped the price of their stones. Ern was selling medium mana stones for 10 coins, and small ones for 2.5 coins. He noticed that all the other sellers had also started to maintain such prices. The guy noticed multiple reductions in value, all happening faster than he expected. The mana stones he was selling were worth 1 coin less than their market price. The other merchants were angry with him because he lowered the average cost, and consequently, their prices began to fall as well. This began to destroy the competition, which was not a problem for Ern because he was making a profit thanks to the VIP privilege. Opening the inventory, the guy noticed that he had 1,002 coins. He thought he could sell medium stones cheaper than usual, but selling small stones for less than 2 coins is not profitable. The profit from the average grade stones was 1 coin, which didn't seem like a bad profit for Ern. Though the stones were dropping in value faster than he expected, he couldn't affect it much. Realizing that he had other things to worry about now, he decided to enter the system alone. Ern intended to take revenge on Seo-kyun for his past life by deciding to take everything from him. The librarian realized that the customer was looking for mid-level sword techniques and pointed out that the methods were arranged by power strength in this catalog, asking if the customer liked anything. Ern noticed that these techniques were expensive. Realizing that the library was not a stall on the street and that it was not enough, he asked Chin Sung if there was anything more expensive and powerful. The man was surprised at the suggestion that he look at the skills in their Thousand Swords library, which was a basic set of unique primary skills that they were selling. The guy saw that the set contained the Breaking Fist Despair Fist sword technique, Swan Tian maneuvering ruler, all worth over 1,000 coins. Meanwhile, in the Castle of 1,000 Swords sect, which significantly influenced the 5th Murim system, its impact was not even comparable to that of the Mountain Bamboo sect. Ern told Chin Seng that he wanted to test something. The man asked what exactly the buyer wanted to try out. Seok-hyun graciously greeted the customer who approached him, saying that he had waited for Ern all day and thought he would never come to him again. The vendor provided the guy with the martial skills he had asked for yesterday, the 8th Cloud Dragon Art and the Scarlet Dawn Green Cloud technique. Ern indicated that he didn't think the vendor would be able to acquire both skills, and he was pleased with his quick work. Seok-hyun replied that the whole team had been looking for them, and they couldn't keep dear customers waiting, asking if Ern wanted to buy anything else. The guy responded positively and assured me that he wanted to buy something else from him. Aaron explained that Hiphale is a rich guy he serves. He is the ultimate martial arts fanatic, and he is hard to please with a mid-level martial arts book, so he needs Seo-kyun's help. The seller was enthusiastic about such a story, envious that his team would help the buyer with everything. The boy thought about showing Hiphale something big rather than many small techniques. Seo-kyun asked the buyer what he meant by saying anything, and one big Earn replied that he was talking about the unique primary skill of the Thousand Sword Castle. Earn assumed it would be difficult for Seo-kyun to get such a technique, but the man didn't understand why the buyer needed it. The vendor assured him that the martial arts from the third or fourth world of Merim were outstanding, assuring him that he would try to get them, knowing that the most important thing was not to get caught by the librarian. When Earn saw his answer, he realized Seo-kyun had fallen for the trick he had planned. The seller added that it looked rather risky for him, so he wanted to take Earn's advance payment. The guy sent him 200 coins. The guy promised to pay the rest of the coins when he received the book. Seo-kyun was pleased that the buyer had left him 200 coins as a down payment and replied that he would contact him in 5 days. Seo-kyun knew that the only people in the library were him and the librarian himself, Jin Sung, and he realized that he needed to avoid getting caught. A few hours later, a customer told the librarian he wanted to check something out. The guy asked Jin Sen what would happen if anyone tried to sell a unique primary skill elsewhere. The librarian laughed and replied that such a thing was impossible, asking what kind of crazy martial artist would think of stealing from divine swords. Ginseng was ready to swear on his honor that he would regret not passing away sooner if he did such a thing. Aaron was satisfied that the first step had been successfully completed, realizing he needed to find the 1,000 coins he had promised Seo-kyun. Still, 5 days would be enough for him to go for a walk. After opening the trade window, the guy noticed that his supply of medium mana stones was rapidly melting away and wondered if he should buy more. After Earn contacted the seller, he saw his nickname and refused to sell him mana stones. This happened several more times, and Earn did not understand what had happened and why everyone had refused to sell him stones. The salesman's responses were more aggressive than he thought, realizing it would affect his job slightly. Suddenly, the guy noticed a maid standing behind a tree not far from him. He thought it was strange. As he got closer, the guy noticed the girl asking the maid to turn something out of his mouth. Suddenly, Darian slapped the maid, who refused to follow her instructions, while Earn watched. The man was shocked to see his older sister's behavior and didn't understand what was happening there. The two daughters of the Steelguard family were complete opposites. Karen, the eldest daughter, possessed the warmth of a spring day, while Darren, the second daughter, was cold and contemptuous. Darian indicated that she was not satisfied with the maid's answer, envying that she would ask her again. Expecting a satisfactory answer, she was trying to find out what Earn was hiding from them. Isel replied that she was a simple servant girl who cared for the young master, ensuring she knew nothing. Darian tried to strike the maid again without hearing a response, but was suddenly stopped by a shout from Earn, who had intervened in their conversation. Earn asked his sister why she shouldn't leave the maid alone, and the girl looked suspiciously at her brother. The girl asked Earn what had brought him here, but she didn't understand how to react to his sudden appearance. The guy said he wanted to ask him something because he was angry and didn't understand what his sister was doing with the maid. Darian was surprised that her brother was treating her so well, asking when he had been so close to his maid. Adding that Isel was doing a below-average job, Earn asked her to leave her alone. Her sister asked her brother to stay out of their conversation, stating that she was teaching her a lesson about what she had done wrong and that Earn should be grateful to her for it. Attempting to strike again, Darian indicated that he was doing his brother a favor by training his maid for him. Isel was about ready to get punched in the face again. Suddenly, Earn stopped his sister's strike by pointing out that if she had a complaint about his maid, she should report it to him. Darian asked her brother how dare he touch her, asking him to let go of her hand. Earn replied that he had warned her. The boy let go and tossed his sister aside, ordering her to leave Isel alone. Darian hadn't expected this. The sister declared to her brother that he was crazy to ask what this insignificant maid meant to him. The guy replied that his sister was crazy, pointing out that she'd better not touch the people who served him. He asked his sister to apologize to Isel before it was too late. Suddenly, Darian started beating herself in the face. Isel was surprised and asked why she was doing this. Darian asked her brother not to act arrogantly, asking who her father would favor if she came running to him with such injuries. Her sister was curious to see her father's face when she told him Ern had raised his hand to her. The boy was surprised at such meanness on her sister's part. Looking at Darian, Ern pointed out that she did not cease to exceed his expectations. The girl interjected, trying to figure out what he had said. Whispering in her ear, the guy wanted her to remember what he would say to her before she did what she had in mind. Suddenly, the girl replied that she had nothing to do with it. Ern was surprised at her answer. Her brother said he would tell her father immediately if it was okay with her. Darian looked at her younger brother with anger. Darian didn't understand how Ern knew about all this, so she apologized to the maid so her father wouldn't find out. The maid was surprised at this turn of events, and Darian added that she would try not to let it happen again. Ern kindly asked if Izel was all right. The maid nodded positively, but she didn't fully understand what had happened. Crying, the maid added that she didn't deserve to be treated in such a way that he would defend her by calling herself a mere maid. Guy stated that if anyone dared to touch one of his men, he would not forgive them, no matter who they were or whether they were the emperor. Ern asked the maid not to belittle herself too much. Izel continued to cry at his words. Darian suspected something strange about her younger brother's behavior. As he left, the boy told Izel she deserved to be treated like that, and the maid did not resist him. Darian did not understand how Ern knew about her secret. Darian suspected that someone had given Ern information she was trying to hide. She didn't understand how her younger brother could even know about it. A few days later, the members of the multi-union, of which Hearthstone was the leader, were still arguing amongst themselves because Ern was selling medium stones for 7 coins apiece. Suddenly, Hearthstone noticed the nickname of a stone seller, who assumed someone was desperate for coins. The leader was surprised to see, for the first time, that his level and description made him look like an experienced merchant. The stone seller said that sometimes 10 coins in the present are more valuable than 100 coins in the future. Hearthstone understood that these words made sense and replied that even he makes quick transactions when coins are needed. The unknown man replied that the order was destroyed because of such sellers. The leader thoughtfully asked the stone seller what he was suggesting in such a case. The unidentified man replied that they had to choose one of 2 options. The first was to buy everything before the intruder could get to them. Hearthstone interrupted him and assured him that this option was not feasible because they couldn't buy up all the stones. Asked what other option, the unknown replied that they needed to lower the price of mana stones even more than Ern. Therefore, the multi-union has significantly reduced the price of mana stones from what buyers bought them up like crazy. The price for the average mana stones was already 6 coins. Ern assumed that a bidding war would begin, realizing that demand was growing insanely fast and that he would be even busier. Hearthstone furiously asked him to explain because an unknown member of their sect had promised that lowering the price would produce a particular result. Unknown replied that he didn't remember saying that, pointing out that their prices had to be lowered to prevent the infiltrator from getting all the mana stones. Even so, the leader pointed out that Ern wouldn't stop selling mana stones, saying the unknown man's words weren't persuasive. John Doe was fine with the criticism, pointing out that Hearthstone can do it all at once. He stated that his predictions were wrong if the leader plans to succumb to that offender's entreaties. Hearthstone stated that he would never succumb to this guy who dropped the price of mana stones. The unknown man replied that if that were the case, the sect leader should continue to trust him, stating that he had a secret plan up his sleeve to stop the intruder. Hearthstone responded that its capital is losing momentum, and this infringer doesn't even show any signs of it. The unidentified person asked what the agreement was with the offender, assuming that since they lost 1 coin, the offender lost 2. The leader stated that the violators' prices were the same as theirs from yesterday. Suddenly, he realized what this stone seller was getting at. The unidentified man suggested that Ern was now at his breaking point. Hearthstone pointed out that this guy is the kind of person who hides a trump card until the last minute and then shows it. Hearthstone indicated that he didn't understand anything, because why would Ern take such a risk, asking an unknown person about it? The stone merchant replied that Ern planned to overtake the mana stone business. The sect leader was surprised by such an assumption. The man was sure that it was impossible because there were limits on goods sales, and he asked how he could circumvent them. Unknown replied that the guy would quickly solve this problem by finding helpers who would sell instead of him or create a union just like them. Hearthstone got the question that wasn't this kind of thing this multi-union man was created for, surprised by such a question. Unknown added that by gathering a few vendors and increasing their control over the mana stone market, They would then become the ones who controlled the price of mana stones. Hearthstone realized the words of an unknown member of their union who added that he admires the head of their union, who aims to control prices. The leader agreed with the unknown man's words and replied that this was precisely what he planned to do. This unknown was Ern, who realized that Hearthstone wanted to be called the head, realizing that he saw right through him. The guy had been waiting for the formation of this alliance since he started selling mana stones. He had a special privilege of the maximum level that the people of the lower system didn't even know about. The guy assumed he looked pretty depressed, but information is an essential aspect of commerce, so he could understand why controlling information is a special privilege. Ern has been a member of the multi-union since its inception to have a bloody competition for profit. The first type of people participating in this competition couldn't live without instant gratification. The second type is the crazies willing to abolish these trades for the evil of all so that everyone suffers from them. Ern, pretending to be a multi-union member, said that they would stop Ern, the infiltrator, and show everyone their union power. When the infiltrator reaches the limit, they can strike, saying that they need to come to an agreement urgently. Hearthstone assumed that if he successfully removed Ern from the game and took over the mana stone industry, he would be able to control prices, and if a new merchant appeared, he would immediately be hit by the alliance. Such a scenario seemed great in the mind of the Hearthstone Union leader. The guy planned to lead the leader in this direction, leading him into deception because the other members of the multitude had not realized it yet. Some sellers within this competition will begin to get defensive and watch the Ern and multi-union battle closely. The guy assumed that they would hire a third party to take all the mana stones for themselves, and the wise person to do so would be Ern. Meanwhile, in Darian's room, the girl sat at the table. She tried to figure out how her younger brother knew about it because he had precisely said Damien's company name. Suddenly, there was a knock on the girl's door and Darren asked who was there. She said that she had asked no one to bother her. When she opened the door, the older sister asked her brother why he had come to her without letting him go straight to his room. The guy looked her straight in the eye and told Darian that they needed to talk about something. Ern asked if she knew about Damien's firm, and the sister asked her brother to come into her room. Damien's firm provided gentle materials to homes and was relatively stable and respected. However, the problem was that they had a close relationship with Darian in a past life. After he became a lord, the firm used money to manipulate Ern. When the sister asked how he understood, Ern replied that the firm had changed significantly since she became involved in their affairs, stating that it was very obvious. Darian asked her brother how he could prove his words, and asked him to show them to her. Ern asked his sister to calm down because he had come to her to understand her position. Ern pointed out that he was the family's youngest child, Sug, and he understood that he would get nothing from the family. Still, as a son mastering the breath of steel, he could probably make money as a swordsman. The boy clearly understood that Darren was trying to find a way to make a living. The sister realized that Ern had been hiding his true self until now, and now he was trying to show her something. She tried to find out from her brother what he wanted. Ern asked the sister to listen to him. The brother said that he was only interested in one thing, asking if she had come to the firm herself or if they had come to her. The girl replied that they were the first to come to her and said they just wanted to do her a favor. Darren added that he would have to pay them back for her in return. Ern realized that his sister was lying to him because it was impossible that such a powerful firm would come to her. Suddenly, the sister asked if her brother was satisfied with what she had told him. For now, he could start criticizing her. Ern replied that he had not come to her for that. The guy wondered how he could earn his sister's trust by claiming that they were very much alike. The girl was surprised at his words and asked what he wanted. Ern knew she had such a temper. Ern offered the sisters the chance to work with him jointly. Darian was surprised at such an offer from her younger brother. The younger brother knew it would be difficult for his older sister to refuse such an offer. After the conversation, Ern left his sister's room, indicating that he trusted her with the case. Darian replied that he would report the specifics of their case later. The brother knew it was a lie-filled argument, but it wasn't such a bad deal right now. Ern realized he had to work with Darian to see what would happen after a specific time. Using the eye of bidding measurements, Ern realized that the main thing for him right now was dealing with Hearthstone. He noticed a message in his bidding profile. The guy received 800 coins from the Mountain Bamboo sect. Ern assumed that they had caught Hachal Li on his tip. The Mountain Bamboo sect sent the guy 10 bamboo life pills as a gift. Ern was surprised that they gave him more than they promised. Ern took the gift of the bamboo life pills. He didn't yet understand what he should do with them. Measurement bargain book users have hit a gold mine. Hearthstone has decided to reduce the price of medium mana stones by another 4 coins. This is due to the price war between Ern and the multi-union. Ern noticed that Hearthstone was trying to minimize his losses, and the guy wondered why the union leader had tossed out 4 coins. The guy had asymmetric information. All he had to do was change his name and buy up all the stones. After a bit of thinking about what was going on, Ern realized that, considering the price and the cashback, it was 3 coins per stone. After checking the inventory, the guy noticed that it was half empty, and he still had 1,573 coins left. He decided to buy another 500 stones. Ern started buying up mana stones, realizing that he would be damn rich when he sold them at a bargain price. That night, guards guarded Damien's firm's office to ensure no one overheard the bosses talking. One of the guards spotted the unknown man and told him he couldn't just walk around there, asking him to leave the area. The unknown man asked the guard to bring him the manager. The guard was immediately surprised by such insolence. The man asked the guard to tell him that Yulof had come to see him. As they approached, the manager was pleased to say she was waiting for Sir Yulof and asked him to follow him because Mrs. Darren was waiting for him inside. The manager escorted the guest to the right room where Yulof seemed suspicious to the guards. A servant informed Sir Damien and Lady Darien that their expected guest, Yulof, had arrived. The girl was surprised at this sudden arrival. The firm leader, Damien, introduced himself to the guest and graciously greeted him. Darien didn't realize who the man was. Darien assumed that her younger brother had sent Yulof. Unable to understand how he could know someone like that, she looked suspiciously at this supplier of mana stones, suggesting it could be a trap. The man assumed Darien thought it was some kind of trap, noticing her gaze on him. Earlier, Ern had informed the sisters that an influential merchant would be coming to the firm, assuring them he could be trusted and asking Darien not to worry. Sitting at the table, Yulof suggested they get down to business, stating that his mana stones were excellent quality and asking how much they would pay. Damien began to scrutinize the samples the merchant had given them. The head of the firm told the trader that with one stone, it was tough to determine its quality and how much they were willing to pay him. Yulof replied that he had prepared for such an occasion and had brought more mana stones with him, and he began to take them out of his inner pocket. The influential merchant placed a whole bag of mana stones on the table. The firm's head was surprised by such a quantity. An hour earlier, Ern realized that partner markets are expensive, but he accumulated many points. Ern bought a human mask made of human skin, and when he put it on, he looked like a completely different person. He also bought a voice-changing pill, which, after taking it, changed his voice for 30 minutes. The guy pretending to be Yulof was sure that he could complete the deal in 30 minutes. The head of the firm, Damien, said that these stones were of the highest quality. Yulof said he wanted 100 gold pieces for them. The head of the firm replied that this price was a bit high, offering him 90 gold pieces, saying that no one in Lee Height would provide more for them. Yulof got up and asked Darien to follow him because he couldn't bargain with someone who didn't understand. The girl agreed with him, saying that she had hoped for their agreement since they had bargained with the nobles. In Yulof's guise, Ern was glad that his sister read the atmosphere well. Leaving, Darren told the head of the firm that they would contact another company to sell these mana stones. Yulof pointed out that a Krite firm was nearby. Suddenly, Damien asked them to stop pointing out that Yulof was a fierce man. He was willing to settle for 100 gold for a mana stone. Damien didn't expect Yulof to raise the price to 120 gold pieces now, so he asked the seller if he was serious. Yulof repeated that he wanted 120 gold coins for his top-quality mana stones. The head of the firm realized that if he bought the stones for 120 coins, he would not profit at all from this deal. Yulof stated that he came to him knowing the market price, adding that he couldn't just be cheated. The salesman looked at the head of the firm seriously and pointed out that it was called a trade negotiation. Damien asked the stone seller to sit down first, informing him that he wasn't backing out of the deal and was willing to consider a price of 120 gold pieces. Suddenly, the head of the firm cast aside all doubts and said that he was ready to buy all the stones from Yulof for 120 gold coins. In Yulof's guise, Ern did not show his joy at such a favorable deal, and Darien was surprised at what was happening. The girl didn't realize if it even made sense since they were arguing between 90 and 100 gold pieces. Now, suddenly, the price had jumped to 120. Darien thought Yulof only looked intimidating, assuming the man was up to something. The head of the firm decided to be honest with the mana stone seller, saying that he could get up to 130 gold for such quality stones, adding that he would remain in favor by 10 gold pieces. Yulaf pointed out that he shouldn't joke with him like that. Damien indicated that he meant what he said because he too should get a profit for his labor, until Yulaf provided enough stones to make up for the low profit. Yulaf placed a pouch on the table, indicating that the head of the firm underestimated him. Damien asked the salesman what it was all about. Suddenly, Yulaf said that in this pouch lay 300 mana stones, realizing that such a quantity would be enough. Yulaf added that labor fees, storage management, and transportation costs notwithstanding, he didn't think Damien would be at a loss. The head of the firm realized that this opportunity comes only once in a lifetime because the price of mana stone depends on its availability. Even if buyers have the money, they won't be able to purchase these stones because they are usually out of stock. Damien realized that 300 of these stones, no matter the price, could make him a profit even if he was destroyed in the negotiations. Darian was surprised to hear that the head of the firm was willing to buy the stones, saying that this trade would benefit their firm. When Damien heard a merchant was willing to trade, he didn't expect so many, and Yulaf exceeded his expectations. The head of the firm said that he didn't have many connections, but he knew the market quite well, and thought it was strange that he hadn't heard of Yulaf before. Yulaf asked that he suspected him of someone Damien had never heard of or seen before selling expensive mana stones. Damien replied that he did not think so, assuring that he couldn't suspect someone whom Mistress Darian herself had recommended. The man said it was just curiosity, asking Yulaf to tell more about himself. Yulaf was pissed off by this behavior of the head of the firm, but he understood that Darren would probably refuse him. He wondered why the girl looked much more interested than Damien. Exhaling, Yulaf asked what Damien wanted to know and what kind of person he was. Suddenly, his voice changed. Ern, in the disguise of Yulaf, realized that 30 minutes had already passed, and the effects of the voice-altering pill had worn off. Coughing, Yulaf used the voice-altering pill again so as not to arouse too much suspicion. The surrounding people saw the strange behavior of their interlocutor. The head of the company asked whether the stone seller was in a straight line. Yulaf apologized for the incident, but his voice remained the same, saying that he had to take medication because of his illness. Damien pointed out that in that case, Yulaf should not delay there, and he would get to work on paying for that merchandise immediately. In the guise of Yulaf, Ern was pleased that even though it wasn't planned, he had managed to avoid questions. Darian indicated that since they were alone, she would like to learn more about this man her younger brother had recommended. The girl reported that she acted like she was on his side for the deal, but was curious to know who he was and how she knew the youngest member of their family. Yulaf pointed out that it was none of her business. Darian objected, stating that she deserved to find out from him. The man asked why she thought Damien's firm was her local convenience store, and why she thought they bought mana stones of unknown origin. Darian proudly replied that the firm had bought the stones for her because she had guaranteed her identity as Darian of Steelguard, and the boy was surprised at such confidence. The girl added that the case has put her in a difficult position because the firm will blame her if anything goes wrong. Darian stated that she couldn't ignore Yulaf's strange behavior. The guy was surprised to hear the words. The girl asked why he had tried so hard to hide his identity, assuming that the name Yulaf was not his real name. Ern had expected such insight from his sister. Darian seriously assumed it was her younger brother Ern's trap, and asked her companion about it. Ern, in the guise of Yulaf, laughed at such a statement. The girl did not understand what could make the man laugh so much. Yulaf asked her what kind of crazy person would burn 30,000 gold pieces to mess with some girl. The man assumed that the girl wanted to say that these mana stones were stolen, and he was some kind of criminal. Darian asked that this was not the case. Yulaf explained that in order to get 300 stones, he would have to rob an imperial vault. Despite his lack of talent, the girl asked how he got that many stones. The man pointed out that he had heard from Ern that they were siblings worse than enemies. Darian was surprised at how Yulaf translated the conversation. The girl asked Yulaf to take his hands off her and not touch her again. He was furious at the permissiveness of the stranger. Yulaf replied that when he grew up, he realized that his family was the only people he could lean on. The man informed Darian that she should get along with her kin so she wouldn't regret it. Yulaf left and asked the girl to wait in the carriage, saying he would send her compensation through Ern. Darian didn't realize that the strange man had met her and was familiar with her younger brother, but she didn't know that it was Ern disguised as another man. Guy noticed that the final price of the average mana stones for Damien's firm was 120 gold coins. In coins, it was 12. Ern had a bamboo pill of 10 pieces, 690 medium mana stones, 2 voice changer pills, a leather human mask, and 62 kilograms of gold. The guy was very satisfied because he bought the mana stones for 3 coins and sold them for 12, and, considering Darien's 1% share, he made an incredible profit. Ern realized that with age, the only thing you can really rely on is family, so it's best to be on good terms with them. The boy realized that he had to disguise himself as Yulaf to get the truth to his sister. Ern assumed that his true intentions never reached Darien, which struck him as ironic. Ern's present life is different from the past. He was not ready to accept any acts of ill intentions from his brother and sister toward him. Still, all the hatred and resentment he harbored toward them had long since faded. The guy decided it wasn't bad because he shouldn't focus on resentment toward his sibling. Ern stated that he was a few steps away from Seok-hyun, asking him to wait, and the hour of reckoning would catch up with him. The commonly accepted currency of the continent of Jaeon is gold coins, while in the world of Murim, it is gold pieces. Gold is a rare metal that was very often used as currency. That night, the guy managed to sell some gold. Thus, his balance was 2,752 coins. The guy was pleased with such an event because preparations for his fee were complete, and he noticed that he had an unread message. The system reported that Ern had received a message from Seok-hyun asking if he would like to read it. The guy realized that he shouldn't appear desperate. The guy realized he needed to look natural. He took a deep in and out breath, slightly calming down, and took the message. The salesman noticed that Ern had entered the chat room, which made Seok-hyun very happy. He knew that he had better be on time because trust drives everything in this business. Seok-hyun had put a lot of pressure on himself to acquire the secret arts of the poison sect in Heavenly Sword Castle. If he only mentioned poison or poison sect in passing, everyone would just leave the chat room with him. Ern was surprised to learn that Seok-hyun was having trouble getting the order he needed from his connections, realizing that the salesman was trying to cheat him again. The guy thanked him for his hard work and asked if they had come to a consensus. Seok-hyun replied positively, saying he was ready to show him the goods. The chaos cultivation technique, unlike the heavenly cultivation, which can be mastered by anyone who is part of the heavenly castle, is only allowed to be used by a select few. Ern ensured that the vendor had the inner cultivation technique he needed, which contained not only the primitive laws of the natural world, but also the laws of the universe. Ern replied to the salesman that with this arrangement, Hefel would be satisfied. The salesman decided to share the guy's information so that he could pass it on to Hefel. Seok-hyun pointed out that 2,500 coins were giant. However, even such an amount was small for a chaos cultivation technique. The seller added that the heavenly cultivation technique costs 2,000 coins in the official market, and even if one considers it overpriced, it still cannot be resold in the channels. Ern received a message from Seok-hyun that the market price of this technique was about 5,000 coins. The guy realized what the seller was trying to tell him. Ern considered it a great skill to sow doubts in the buyers' minds and push them to buy his overpriced junk. And he realized that this seller had been cheating the buyers for years. Earlier in Seok-hyun's past life, he was often deceived by Ern, who previously wanted to become an expert. The salesman replied that saving human life is always a priority. He asked me to trust him because he would give him everything he needed to become an expert. Earlier, Ern had fully trusted the deceptions of Seok-hyun, who assured that their meeting was orchestrated by fate itself. Seok-hyun replied that he couldn't afford to go broke from a big loss alone. He would try to offer him the best price in his past life. The salesman fooled Ern. The boy realized that this was the stupidest decision he had ever made and became very angry with Seok-hyun. Ern asked the salesman how much he wanted to sell the technique, eventually realizing he would cheat him again. Seok-hyun replied that he was willing to sell him the technique for 4,000 coins, saying that he had discounted it by as much as 1,000 coins. The seller added that he only saw a profit from this transaction on either side. Ern realized that he was short 1,000 coins, but he could cover the remaining costs with his skills. The guy replied that he only owed the seller 3,800 coins, considering that he had given him 200 last time. Seok-hyun replied that it wasn't like that, suggesting that this guy was engaging in a major transaction for the first time in the number 1 system. He said that he would spend 200 coins to buy this technique. Ern realized that the seller was trying to deceive him by answering that he was in shock because he was asking him for not 1 or 2 coins, but 1,700 coins. The seller replied that if one goes into details, one should not think these are his client's coins. Since Hifhel will pay, why don't they take the easiest way out of this transaction? The guy replied to the seller that he would first talk to his customer, Seok-hyun. He was fine with that, replying that he would wait for his message. Ern realized that Seok-hyun was trying to make it look like he was the only one who would lose if Ern didn't agree to the deal. The guy's current balance was 2,752 coins. Ern realized that he would still be 25 coins short if he had used all his special privileges. Ern said he would rather throw them on the ground than trade them at the exchange center because he didn't have much time, and the sales limit was pushing him, so he wouldn't get another chance. The guy calculated the losses he might incur in this deceitful deal with Seok-hyun. Ern realized that, in any case, he just needed to pick up the tech later, and it would pay off hundreds of times over. He took the salesman to see that he had consulted with his client. The guy reported that 4,200 coins wasn't a bad deal. It was far from an ordinary secret art technique. The seller was happy about this message and replied that his client was highly generous in paying such a sum. After that, they made a trade deal. Seok-hyun provided the chaos secret art chaos cultivation technique, and Ern provided the necessary amount of money. The guy was happy because the prey took the bait. He managed to trick Seok-hyun, who had cheated him in his past life, into accepting the deal, and then it was finalized. Ern realized that his precious trap was finally activated, and now he could manipulate Seok-hyun. His account balance became negative. He knew what revenge tasted like, and the guy found what had happened exciting. When the guy realized why the people from the Mountain Bamboo sect had been chasing Hakshal Lee for more than a decade, he looked forward to making new acquaintances. Ern was surprised that Seok-hyun was starting to get excited about making a fraudulent deal so quickly that the guy decided to teach him a lesson. The guy asked why he looked happy, and the seller replied that it's not every day he manages to sell something for 4,000 coins. Ern wondered how long Seok-hyun would feel like this. The salesman didn't know what he was talking about. The man saw a message with his name on it from unknown people who said he now belonged to them. Seok-hyun was surprised, assuming he had eaten the wrong thing. Ern replied that he knew his true name, stated that Chun-heng was a fraud, and asked if the librarian, Chin-seng, knew about the shenanigans that he was doing behind his back. The man wondered how this guy managed to find out who he really was, and he started to get worried. Chun-heng decided to calm down because he couldn't confess so easily, and continued pretending to answer the buyer that he didn't know what he was talking about. The guy asked Chun-hyun not to embarrass himself or act like someone he didn't know because he knew him. Ern suggested inviting a third-party fucking verification, informing them that the librarian Chin-seng is also online. The man was shocked by this outcome of events. The guy wanted to call out to Chin-seng, but Chun-heng asked Ern not to, so he admitted that his name was really Chun-heng. Ern pointed out that there was no point in playing dumb since he had confessed his actual name anyway. Chun-heng did not understand who this guy was who managed to trap him. He realized that the trade that looked like a joke was a trap. When the man noticed that the guy was from System 0, he made sure he wasn't imagining it and that he was really from that system. He stole martial arts from the library. His nickname is Seok-hyun. He didn't tell anyone that he deals in measurement transactions. This book of measurement transactions was also stolen, so there were no records in it. Chun-heng didn't understand how a young guy from a lower system managed to know all this and guide him. Ern was ready to tell this salesman a few rules, assuring him that he had better memorize them because if he broke them, he would become an enemy in the Heavenly Sword Castle. The man asked if the guy realized that he would also become an enemy in such a case, and replied that such threats do not work on him. Ern replied that they could travel across dimensions, no matter how majestic the Heavenly Sword Castle was. The man asked about the suspension of commerce because they wouldn't let him through for anything. The guy replied that he would soon start feeling guilty if he didn't immediately return the chaos cultivation technique to them, and said that they had a corrupt librarian. Ern pointed out to Chun-heng that he should speak respectfully to important people because, in Heavenly Sword Castle, people who leaked superior skills were treated as #1 criminals. Chun-henu was terrified to see Ern's reports that he would have a one-way ticket and a lifetime of torture to boot. The guy added that he would never mess with a unique supreme skill if it were him. Ern called Chun-heng an honest, brave, and ambitious man who didn't know what to do. The lad assumed the man hearing all this was treasured out of fear. Ern was pleased that he had managed to outwit the rogue. Ern asked Chun Hyun if he was ready to work with him. Chun Hyun said that of course he was ready to work with him. In response, the guy asked him not to do anything stupid. The guy said that first, he would die if he didn't respond for more than 5 seconds. Second, he would die if he closed their message tab. Third, he had to follow all of Ern's orders. Ern added that in the fourth, he would pass away if addressed informally, ordering him to think before he spoke. The guy indicated that let the gathering time begin now. Chun Hen asked what he was talking about, and Ern added that he would send him to the other side of the world if he acted like he didn't understand. Suddenly, the guy received 3,420 coins from Seokhyun Ern, indicating that he had been given 4,000 coins, assuming he had bought candy with the rest. Chun Hen replied that this was due to the coin transfer fee, assuring it was 5%. The guy replied that he had forgotten entirely about the commission, indicating that the exchange center had stolen 580 coins. Ern asked Chun Heng where his 580 coins were. When Ern asked if the lawful master would pay the apprentice's debt, the man replied that he would take the transfer fee. Chun Heng sent the guy the missing coins. Ern was satisfied that this rogue understood how to treat him. Ern was surprised that after the refund, he had 1,000 more coins than before he paid him, because he could have tons of coins even with the transfer fee and repeating the transfer. The guy understood that the exchange center couldn't be that stupid to assume they had already figured out how people could abuse the system. Ern still didn't know why he'd gotten the maximum level privileges, realizing that if he did anything suspicious, he could ruin everything for himself. The fellow also asked for a refund of the 200 coins he had deposited as prepayment, for he had never heard of the pay for which Chun Heng had told him. Chun Heng replied that he used all the money to obtain the chaos cultivation technique and had to bribe the guards. Ern angrily told the man not to take him for a fool and told him to return the missing coins. Chun Heng threw back 200 coins. The guy replied that in that case, they had dealt with the chaos cultivation technique, suggesting that he move on to the green technique and the 8 cloud dragon martial arts. Then Ern received all the coins he had spent earlier from this vendor. Chun Heng asked if that was all, or if there was more. Ern saw that he only had 215 coins left on his balance. Ern said that from now on, the time he spent on it would also be billable, stating that he was willing to make it easy for him. Chun Heng was shocked to hear that he owed the guy the last 215 coins he had left. He didn't understand how Ern knew how many coins he had left in his account. The man concluded and asked that this guy was a Veep Ern and asked him not to divulge this information. Chun Hyun didn't understand why Veep was doing this since he should have been on a different level from Mu Huge and him. The man asked Ern what he wanted from him. Ern replied that it would be appropriate to say that he was returning an old debt. Chun Hen asked which dog he was talking about. Ern asked Seok-hyun if he didn't understand the seriousness of the situation, stating that he was the only one asking questions. Seok-hyun didn't understand what this guy wanted from him since he had no more coins left. The guy asked me to stop lying to him because he must have made a nice fortune by cheating people from the zero system. He asked what happened to all the other coins that were cheated. The man replied that he spent all the coins on alcohol, betting, and providing for his 2 wives. Ern asked who handled everything and immediately pointed out that he must have more than just coins. The man replied that he had books on martial arts and could make a decent sum by selling them all. He realized that he could get 1,000 coins from the sale of all the books. Chun Heng was ashamed to realize that he would have to get rid of the books, but at least in the future, he would be able to return most of them. He decided to sell enough to get by this month. The guy asked what martial arts books he was talking about since he was talking about the martial arts themselves. Ern reported that Chun Heng's primary weapons were internal energy cultivation and body brightening techniques, suggesting that he had studied several auxiliary and sword techniques. The man who ordered Chun Heng to receive all the techniques was shocked by this order and stated that it would equal his demise. Ern replied that they were 2 different things by asking what he should tell the librarian about his shenanigans and suggesting he choose for himself. The guy offered him his life or martial arts, which he tricked into giving him 10 seconds to think. Ern had always wondered about those who lived in the system alone, going to another world with their martial arts. Chun Hen had passed down to him all the martial techniques he had. This incident was enough for Earn to realize that it wasn't true, realizing that Chun Heng had nothing else of value left but his life. The guy asked the scammer why he really didn't have the basics. The man didn't understand what he was telling him. He was desperate. Earn understood that if it was only about the point techniques of the fist and fingers, they would themselves be a level below since they were not his basics, asking why his body techniques were so weak. Hyun replied that it didn't mean anything. He asked the guy what else he wanted from him, apologizing that he tried to end it as soon as possible because he had nothing left. The man reported that he gave away all of his internal energy, money, and martial arts, stating that his balance sheet had a minus sign due to transaction fees. The man asked the man to stop making a big deal out of it. He knew that Chun Hyun was the type of person who, even in a situation like this, would wriggle and deceive someone. Earn checked his profile and was surprised that Chun Heng had nothing left. The man promised not to touch him for now, indicating that he could do what he had always done. Chun Heng was surprised because he was sure the man would let him live. Earn replied that he only told him to do what he told him to do to survive. The man was surprised by this message. The guy realized that getting rid of Chun Heng would end everything. And when he thought back to his past life, he realized that he couldn't let him slip away so easily. Earn was ready to make Chun Heng suffer and beg him to send him to the next world. He wanted to get even with him fully for his past misdeeds. Earn then informed the man that he would be in touch, asked him to check his mail regularly, and told him that his whole life was now in his hands. Earn interrupted the conversation with Chun Heng, who still had questions. Relieved, exhaling, the man was satisfied that he had accomplished what he had planned and took the crook on the hook. He realized that everything had gone exactly according to plan. Now Seokyun was in his hands, and the martial arts techniques that Earn had dreamed of in his previous life were also in his possession. Earn decided to now study each technique in more detail, and he began to absorb one method after another. Early in the morning, Earn checked the foot technique of the 1,000 Sages. It lightened the body, but it lacked mobility compared to the stride technique. Earn felt this description, realizing that this technique has pros and cons. The guy realized that running fast is not everything, so he jumped off the cliff with the analogy that he was like a bird floating in the air. Upon landing, Earn realized that it was worth all the effort, for at that moment he thought he would die, for he had absorbed this skill, relying only on the special privilege of the sponge inside his head. Earlier, when he was absorbing techniques, his brain without privilege could have just exploded, but he managed to survive. Earn thought that he had enough body lightening techniques, so the sword technique Swantian's initial stance was a peaceful water wave. Using this technique's combat skills, the guy realized that the power of these attacks was quite impressive. The secret technique that turned the hero Rebahan Steelguard into a knight of mythical rank is a mystical blade that was thought to be a lost technique after the owner's demise. Earn was surprised that he had managed to discover this secret technique that had been lost. The mythical blade would be recreated in his homeland in the lands of Steelguard after more than a decade. After making a strike, Earn thought this technique was too strong. Earn didn't believe that Halfael was capable of such a thing, even though he was a first-class knight, assuming he too could strike such blows. The guy couldn't believe that a swordsman pacifist from the first system had surpassed the greatest knight in the country besides Earn's father. Earn realized why he thought he was low system and ignored he was a little upset by this realization. Afterward, the guy realized he had no reason to be sad because he was only better off if he was trained and under his power. Warming up, Earn decided to check out the rest of the people he knew. He was curious to know their powers for real. A little later, the guy used the Heavenly Saint technique, which seemed obsolete to him compared to the internal cultivation technique of the Breath of Steel Breath. After finishing, he used the Xiantian sword technique. He was delighted with this sword technique. Then he tried out the 1,000-dimensional footwork technique. It was a little weak for the first system, but overall decent after applying the initial Despair Destruction technique. Continuing to train, Earn used the Golden Wheel technique, which included many pressure skills, suggesting it might be helpful. Earn realized that all 5 martial arts were compatible with continental arts after he increased his physical strength, but he didn't understand what was happening to his mana, assuming that they used mana stones. The guy realized that martial arts attracted a lot of attention, deciding he shouldn't stand out right now. Internally cultivating Dantian's heart mana in this situation would be very useful. Earn assumed that he needed to train twice as much. After some thinking, Earn found out that these techniques were slightly different from each other. He thought it was impossible because the pressure points were the same. Aaron decided to try using a mirage so close yet far away, thousands of millions of trial and error, that he couldn't see that ridiculous light. He used a silver aura with some practice, which surprised him. No matter how much the guy thought about it, he still didn't understand. He thought it would work, but he was too busy realizing that revenge and contentment were the best outcomes. The butler asked the young gentleman to stop. Ern was surprised, not assuming what he wanted from him. The man reported looking everywhere for the lad. When asked where Ern had gone so early in the morning, the lad replied that he had gone for a walk and asked why he was looking for him. The butler told the young lord that the lord was looking for him. The boy was surprised, not knowing what his father needed from him. The man answered positively and added that his father had been looking for Ern for a long time and had asked him to come up to him. Ern was curious to know what his father wanted from him in the early morning hours and decided to go after all. Walking into his father's study, Ern reported that he had heard from the butler that he was looking for him. The boy noticed the warden next to his father. He hadn't expected to see such a picture before him. Overseer Calloy was a useful man who watched over the island. He was not a knight, but his sword control was quite good. If Hafael was Rebid and Steelguard's right hand, Calloy was left-handed like a shadow. Ern hadn't met him much, and it was hard for him to understand what he was thinking, knowing that it would be difficult to agree with him. The father was curious to know where his youngest son went, assuming he had started practicing first thing in the morning. Ern nodded affirmatively and replied that he was doing his best, for he did not want to disgrace the name of the Steelguards. Rebidan liked his son's attitude towards training. Ern saw the seriousness in his father's eyes. Just looking at him, the guy's body tensed, realizing his father's heroic rank, but it's not as bad as before. Ern realized that the wall between them that he would not overcome was called Awakened Heroic. A wall crushing many knights in despair, a crying wall, a barrier that was hard to imagine, stood before Ern. After some thought, the guy realized he wasn't so simple, assuming he could do it. The father pointed out that this behavior was unexpected for his son. When Ern asked what he was talking about, Rebidan pointed out that Ern had previously told him that he had other ways. It seemed to Rebidan that training with the Dawn was out of place since he had other ways of accomplishing things. The younger son replied that just as there are different paths, one does not have to follow one, stating that he is following several paths at once. The father realized from his son's words that he had decided to chase two birds with one stone, concluding that it would not be easy. Rebidan guessed that the two ways were sword and trade, seeing how his son would react. Ern was surprised to hear this. His father added that he would be interested to see how many more times his son could surprise him. He thought that only Darren was talented at trading. The boy assumed that his father knew his older sister's secret. Rebidan asked his son why he had hidden this talent. Ern replied that the nail might be sticking out of his pocket, but keeping it out of sight was better. Rebidan realized what his son was trying to imply. Rebidan reported that the praise is over, stating that amazing things are one thing and censure is another. In a serious tone, the father asked his youngest son if he knew about his mistake. Ern assumed that using their family name in trade was a mistake. Rebidan nodded, realizing that Ern knew about it. He added that the man's shop was under the protection of the Steelguard family, and he must have known him for sure. Suddenly, my father announced that today or tomorrow he would meet Yulaf in person. The father asked his son why he was quiet in addition to trying to find out if he could contact him. Ern realized that he needed to take care of this before leaving his lands, replying to his father that he would contact Yulaf and make sure he met with his father tomorrow. Rebidan agreed with his son, asking that Ern leave for the Knights Academy in 3. The father asked his youngest son if he was ready for the trip. The boy replied positively, because the butler had already taken care of everything. Rebidan demanded whether he could help his youngest son by suggesting he might want something. Ern realized that his father could help him, but he couldn't say so he decided to keep quiet about it. He told his father that he had cared for him enough already and didn't need anything more. Rebidan replied that in that case, Ern could go to rest, realizing that his youngest son had changed in recent days. He exhaled a sigh of relief, not understanding why his father wanted to meet Yulaf. Suddenly, Calloy approached the boy, offering to chat a little. Ern was surprised at such an offer. It seemed strange to the boy that the warden was the first to start a conversation, realizing that this was the first time happening to him. Ern replied that chatting wouldn't hurt them by asking Warden Calloy what happened and what he wanted to talk to him about. Calloy asked the guy how he knew about the relationship between Darian and Damien's firm. The guy realized what the conversation would be about, assuming he knew who was on his tail. Ern knew that if his father asked something like that, even Darien wouldn't be able to get away with it. The lad replied to Calloy that his father had shocked him. The warden asked Ern what he was talking about. The lad replied that he assumed Rebidon would not let his sister play with him. Calloy replied that it seemed like condoning it, for the Lord valued the talents of Darien's older sister. Instead of warning and punishing her, he allowed her to realize the consequences. Ern heard the warden's words and realized that Darren's weak point had simply evaporated in that case. The warden asked Ern to answer, assuming someone from the firm had told him about it. The boy replied negatively to the warden, indicating that he assumed Calloy was surprised by that answer. Ern added that in a land of their size, needing big customers, merchants would do anything to lure them. He just threw the bait, and the sister fell for it. Kelly was shocked by this explanation. Ern asked if the warden wanted to ask Calloy anything else. Calloy answered that there were no more questions, and the boy said he would go because he still had to meet Yulaf. This conversation annoyed the guy a little because he knew what would happen soon. Ern realized that he had to do something before leaving for the academy, and it would be good for the Steelguard family. The guy realized that Calloy would never know about this, and that he had better start investing. Upon opening the affiliate market, Ern was shocked at the prices he saw, saying that they were just crazy. Now, he understood why everyone had such a bad opinion of these markets. Ern saw that the technique of 1 year of internal cultivation was worth 3,000 coins. From the perspective of a person from the first system, the price for 1 year of realization didn't matter. The average martial arts user can achieve a year of internal nurturing by training for a full year using only basic nurturing techniques. It had been a long time since the people of the first system settled on this value. Ern didn't know what the value of the inner cultivation year was now, because if Seok Hyun had been doing it for 50 years, Ern had nothing to say. Ern couldn't say it was expensive, but he could have gotten it cheaper, so he decided to look at the affiliate market. The guy noticed an advertisement in which Hua Young Nyo was selling inner cultivation for 250 coins for a year and 2,300 for 10 years. Ern realized that he would spend half of his coins, but this price was the cheapest. Ern realized that considering the price, buying potions or fermented nurture and absorbing them would be better, but he didn't have time for that. The guy decided to try to absorb the earlier technique in the trade dimension. By absorbing tech, he managed to skip 60 years of internal nurturing. To be precise, he missed 63 years in the first system. This means nothing, but for the guy it was a weighty reduction. When Ern thought about it, he achieved the achievement and reward of 5 years of inner nurturing, but switching to the second system was almost impossible. The guy remembered that in his past life, he had reached the second system only through luck. He had planned to sell all his martial arts and stop trading after realizing he couldn't do that. In his past life, Ern couldn't even dream of a soul status, but in this life, he can achieve other statuses. After outdoing himself for 2 weeks, Ern thought about what he should do next. Spotting one of the items, he was sure he had previously seen it in a partner store. He realized that the yin and yang bugs would be expensive, but they were only sold at this location. Ern didn't understand what it said. He thought it would be better to learn more about this product to do the right thing. The guy submitted a dialogue request. He was surprised that the interlocutor was online, and he wanted to chat with him immediately. The unknown man surprised a customer who wanted to buy an object and an organism from him. Ern didn't know what he was talking about because he had put them in that category, but he apologized to the seller. The guy wanted to know more about the use of the beetles because he didn't understand much from their description. The seller was surprised that Ern didn't know what the name meant. Assuming that he was from the first system, Ern answered positively. The seller pointed out that the bug symbol in their names is actually a symbol of loneliness parasites living in humans and causing some entertaining symptoms, and this couple is exciting. The unknown man asked Ern if he knew what the worst thing his rival could say was. Ern assumed there was something wrong with this salesman. The vendor said he had just swallowed the yin and yang bugs, laughing suspiciously. Adding that upon hearing this, his heart begins to sink, he loses hope, and he thinks that his end has come. Ern asked if these words were true, and the seller had a positive answer. If Ern used these bugs, he could quickly turn an honest and rich man into a deceitful and stingy man, and even people who wanted revenge would instantly turn into cattle. Ern was alarmed by this conversation. He decided to open a window of insight, seeing that this salesman's character had changed dramatically because of his interest in black magic since birth. The evil god of cruelty who cast away humanity, the devil, with the face of man Ern, thought that by earthly words, he had turned into a black magician or a demonic novice. The seller asked what wasn't. Ern realized that his behavior made the seller more trustworthy and replied that he was right. The unknown man did not recommend using these bugs on his family or mistress. When Ern asked why, the seller replied that it would give him complete control, but there was no way to avoid the side effects. The seller said that people always come to him asking about how to take them off, especially those who have used them to conquer girls. The unidentified man asked the buyer to remember that once the bugs get into the body, it is almost impossible to remove them. Ern was surprised that it would be impossible to remove the effect. Ern rejoiced, realizing this was excellent and far from what he had expected. The guy realized that if that was the case, he shouldn't worry, so he decided to see who would eat the bugs. Later, the lad turned to Sir Havis, standing on the training ground. Havis greeted the young gentleman who approached him. Ern asked if he had finished his training, and the knight answered positively. Captain Raphael's training was enough to make the knights collapse from fatigue. Ern pointed out that after such a grueling workout, Sir Havis was still on his feet, stating that this was what he expected from a knight's ace. The knight thanked him for such words. The guy offered him a drink. Ern was sure the knight was thirsty after such a workout, and Havis was surprised at such a thing. Taking the glass, the knight thanked the young lord, not understanding why he had given it to him, for Havis had never spoken to Ern before. The knight realized that this guy was the son of a lord, and it would be good if he was on his side. He saw that the contents of the glass emitted some kind of unpleasant aura. Havis didn't realize what it was, and was surprised that Ern gave it to him to drink. He didn't feel like drinking that liquid. The knight felt that his throat would feel ill after such a drink, but Ern looked at him intensely, and he could not refuse this drink. Havis didn't understand why the young gentleman was looking at him intently and pressing him with his gaze. The knight decided that whatever would happen, Ern could not give him something terrible, and he drank the contents of this glass. Drinking the contents, which tasted disgusting, the knight was shocked at this. Ern asked how he liked the drink, indicating that he had prepared it especially for Havis. Havis replied that he felt great, suggesting it would be good for his body. Ern was relieved that the knight liked the contents of the glass. When asked if he could take it away, Havis didn't mind and gave the glass to the guy. The knight thanked the young lord, indicating he was now under his care. Ern asked if he was really grateful to him. Ern decided to ask Havis for a favor, because people always return good things. The knight was surprised that the guy wanted to ask him something, so he decided to ask what exactly Ern needed from him. Havis thought that Ern might not have made him drink the liquor, but simply asked him to fulfill a request. He kindly allowed the boy to name his request. Ern suggested the knight move to a secluded spot so the others wouldn't hear their conversation, which surprised Havis. Stepping back to a quiet place, the knight asked what the guy wanted to create an aura. It was a surprise to him. Havis indicated that if Ern followed the instructions, he could create it. Ern asked the knight to show him the aura. The guy was full of energy. He stated that he wanted to see Havis's aura. He was trying to test his hunches. Havis understood what this guy wanted for him, but couldn't understand why he let him drink that stuff. He thought Ern's behavior was charming. Usually, Havis didn't show his aura to others, but when he decided to show it to Ern, he asked the guy to step back a bit. The knight drew his sword, filled with his aura, and began to emit a bright glow. Ern was pleased that the knight had shown him his aura, as he had requested that he cover his face from the forces that were beginning to arise in the area. The guy expected this from the knight ace behind Havis was smoke that originated from his aura. The quality of color and density of Havis's aura were incomparable to those of his older brother. However, he noticed something strange. Ern understood that he didn't have to worry about the level of such an aura, realizing that he was more potent than the knight. The boy realized that everything was going much better than he had thought it would. He was pleased that it had worked. Ern pointed out that he had expected nothing less from Havis. The knight was flattered by such a reaction, pointing out that he was nothing compared to the captain's aura. Havis reported that many other aura users asked Ern why he chose him. The guy replied because he was the youngest. Ern asked when the knight had gotten the aura, assuming that it must have taken him 5 years to get it if he did like everyone else. It hadn't been 10 years if he got it before the others in his 20s. Ern asked who besides Havis could feel the feeling of overcoming the wall of knowing how to surpass oneself. Javis realized why the boy had chosen him. He did not understand why they had to come to a place like this, but he pointed out that he didn't need to be ashamed of his passion for auras. Unexpectedly, Javi suggested that teenagers feel differently than adults. Aaron patted, asking what the knight finally realized why they had come to such a place. Javis was surprised at this guy's reaction. The guy asked what Javis had finally managed to catch him, continuing to clap his hands. Javis didn't understand what was going on. Looking at the guy, he didn't know if he was a human being. The atmosphere changed. Ern noticed that the knight's calmness was gone. Javis didn't realize what was happening. The boy pointed out that overcoming the wall and surpassing himself was just bullshit, suggesting that he would be hurt if everyone knew about it. Javis didn't know what the young gentleman was talking about. Ern replied that he was talking about his personality. The knight didn't realize what was wrong with his personality, so she began to worry. Guy asked Javis how the weather was down south, calling him Mr. Imperial Spy. Javis was surprised at such a statement from the young gentleman and did not understand how he had managed to figure him out. The knight indicated he didn't know what Ern was talking about by asking if being a spy was too much for him. Ern asked why everyone acted like this. When pressed, he realized the knight was lying to him. The guy asked what he thought he was just calling the knight spy, assuring him that he wasn't some maniac. Surprisingly, Javis continued to listen to him. Suddenly, Ern said his real name was Harvest Oracle. The knight panicked, realizing that his mission had failed. Ern pointed out that it would be bad if everyone knew about it, so he purposely brought him to a quiet place, but he still suspected him of calling him a common spy. The knight pondered his words, assuming it was a trap. Javis asked the guy to stop it, stating that he had a knight's pride and that if he had proof, they wouldn't be standing there. Javis pointed out that if the guy had proof, he would have told the count or captain, and they would have looked into it. Ern asked the knight if he would confess to being a spy. Still, Javis replied negatively, adding that he was lucky he wasn't a spy because Ern wouldn't have left the forest if he had been. The guy asked what the threat was, and Javis replied negatively, explaining that he was just not being careful. Ern pointed out that it was confirmed that he was the only one who knew who Javis was, adding that it was just the two of them. The boy asked the knight if he could be sent to another world in this place. Javis looked at him, surprised. Javis didn't know what the guy was thinking, so he assumed he was stupid or trying to intimidate him. The knight decided he shouldn't worry about it since he knew his real name. Javis assumed that would be enough and rushed to attack Ern, who stood against him. Suddenly, Ern disappeared. Javis was sure he had managed to strike a blow at the young master, but didn't understand where he had gone. Ern attempted to strike with a spinning kick at his opponent, but the latter managed to guess his intentions in time. Javis was surprised to see a young lord with such powerful strength confronting him. Ern emitted his powerful aura that shocked the enemy. Javis had not expected this outcome. Looking at his sword, Javis noticed that it was chopped in two. He couldn't help but wonder. Ern pointed out that it was evident since he attacked and backstabbed, asking how Javis became a spy in the first place. The spy realized that this guy would be a problem because he never worried about the younger son of the Steel Guards. Nothing changed when they learned about his talent. The island was full of geniuses and talents. Harvest Oracle was surprised that a 16-year-old boy possessed the aura, realizing that this event was taking a different turn. The spy assumed that this guy had Rebahan and Rebadon's blood awakened in him at such a young age. What was happening in this place was frightening for Harvest Oracle, and he realized that now was not the time to settle. The spy stood up in a fighting stance and realized his life was on the line. Ern was surprised that the spy wanted to fight him with his fists. Ern rescinded his sword and said he was ready to fight him with his fists in a show of strength. Harvest Oracle noticed that this guy's sword and aura were missing, suggesting that it was a foolish move on his part. Spyro tried to shorten the distance with his opponent, intending to strike Ern with a powerful blow. Ern gathered his strength into one and tried to block the attack of the opponent, who was in a rage. Suddenly, a bright flash from their battle showed in the forest, but no one but the two saw it. With his powerful and precise strike, Ern managed to counterattack the opponent, trying to disarm him with the force of the strike, which was much better than Ern thought it would be. After recovering from the blow, Harvest Oracle didn't understand what had happened and how this guy had managed to attack him so powerfully. Approaching Ern, he didn't think the spy might get internally injured by asking if his heart mana was fine. Ern asked Harvest Oracle not to resist, because he would not get away with it this time. The spy looked at the boy with anger, not understanding how he could hide such skills. Harvest Oracle realized that this guy was clearly not messing with him, and he did not know what to do in such a case. Spyro realized they had a noticeable difference in strength that he could not surpass and realized he was finished. Harvest Oracle asked who had told him, assuming it was an inspector or a security agency. Ern pointed out that Harvest Oracle did not understand his situation. He looked at Ern questioningly. The guy looked at the wounded spy and menacingly pointed out that he wasn't the one to ask questions here. Ern has always been curious because this island is only known as the land of Rebahan, who stopped the Empire, and it is neither a research center nor a strategic point, assuming that the information department has so much time. The boy asked what the information department wanted to accomplish by sending spies to the Steel Guards, but Harvest Oracle remained silent. Ern thought it was necessary to choose a loyalist if you were sending him to a foreign country. Looking at the spy, he assumed he had all the skills, so he was also a knight with an aura of class. The guy guessed that since they sent such a one, they were worried about the Steel Guards. Ern pointed out that his silence was very suspicious. Ern informed the spy that he was nothing more than a replaceable tool and asked the Emperor to notice him for it. Harvest Oracle replied that it didn't matter. Ern pointed out that he was making him cry, asking if he knew it only made him feel worse. The spy pointed out that he could tear his nails or limbs and do whatever he wanted. Ern replied that he was not a savage. Ern knew that wasting time torturing a spy was futile, so he had a backup action plan. Taking out a flask of bugs, Ern asked what he should do since what was happening was slightly different. Harvest Oracle was surprised to see the maggot in the flask and did not understand what this guy was doing. Ern pointed out that someone would have lost their temper upon hearing those words, saying they were yin-yang beetles. Harvest Oracle was shocked to hear that Ern had a yin bug in his hands, and he had already eaten yang. He didn't realize it until he ate it. Suddenly the spy realized that the offered drink was along with the yang beetle he drank. Harvest Oracle tried to induce gag reflexes to extract the poison from himself. Ern informed him it was too late, suggesting the bug was already in his brain. Harvest Oracle asked the guy what it meant. He hadn't heard of this kind of poison before. The guy explained that yin and yang's bugs share feelings, and it hurts enough that yang is especially worried about yin. Ern reported that if yin passes away, yang will lose the will to live and start eating Harvest Oracle's brain, and then the owner and the bug will pass away. Harvest Oracle replied that he was not foolish enough to believe all these words, stating that he had never heard of such creatures. Taking out the needle, Ern realized that it would be better to feel it once than to have it explained to him hundreds of times, so he said he would lightly try to do it. Ern pierced the lid of the flask and lightly pricked the yin bug inside. The spy was surprised by it. Suddenly, an indescribable pain pierced the entire body of Harvest Oracle, who didn't believe Ern's words. Earlier, the salesman explained to Ern that the bug yang is more painful than the Inu, but the owner is even more painful and will be a problem if the owner just passes away. The salesman told the guy a few tricks. The first step was to lightly poke the bug's owner, who would feel pain as if countless spears had pierced its body. The second step is to throw the beetle into cold water. The owner will feel as if his body is frozen, even if he can't breathe. The third step is to put the beetle near the fire. The owner will feel as if he has been thrown into a pit of hellfire. The salesman said they could even feel their body burning, but it would all be their imagination. Earlier, John Doe swore that these 3 steps would be enough, but there are a couple more steps that are of the purest evil. Ern ensured this salesman had not lied to him, realizing he had reason to be sure. Unexpectedly, the spy identified himself as Agent Harvest Oracle of the Imperial Information Department. The young lord asked him why he had come to the Steel Guards and what the Empire wanted from their family. The spy replied that the Empire feared a second Rebahan might appear on this earth. Since even mythical ranks were lost in history, the legendary rank was said to be the last in sword skill level. The man who shattered this belief, the knight who stopped an empire from taking over an entire continent, was the guardian Navarro Steelheart. After his son became a knight of heroic rank, it was Rebadan's Steel Guard. Ern indicated that he didn't want to hear what he already knew, asking that the heroic rank was surprising. But after all, the Empire had nothing to worry about. The spy replied that he was right, and the Empire had a couple of heroic and legendary ranks. Harvest Oracle states that what matters is the heroic rank of the son of the mythic rank, asking that it's just a coincidence. The spy indicated that the Empire had thought of this, stating that the reason must have been the blood of the Steel Guardians. Ern asked Harvest Oracle what the Emperor had predicted, thinking the whole snag was in his family. The spy's silence spoke volumes to the guy. Ern asked the spy assigned to them what he thought about it. Harvester Rackle replied that Kieran is the most outstanding among his grandsons, and reaching the second rank at his age is a very significant achievement. Spyro suggested that if Kieran reached his grandfather's or even his father's level, Ern would interrupt him, stating that it was impossible. Harvester Rackle said he would be pleased if Kieran reached at least the awakened rank. He thought power runs in the blood of Steel Guardians, but it weakens with generations. Spyro told Ern that he couldn't have thought he would inherit the most from Rebahan, and besides, he hid those skills well. Ern realized that he wasn't just wrong because he was completely wrong. It's not that power gets weaker with generations. The guy could use the aura from behind the Dimension Transaction book, which had nothing to do with inheritance. Ern realized that the most important thing in this situation was that the Empire monitored their Stilgard family. Suddenly, Ern remembered that his father's disappearance from his past life might have been the handiwork of the Empire. The fall of the Steelguards began with the disappearance of Rebidin father Ern. This has been called Navarro's biggest mystery. In his past life, Ern failed to learn the truth about his father's disappearance, suggesting that the Empire's goal was not just to keep tabs on them, but also to prevent the emergence of a second Rebahan. The guy could not have expected anything like this when he realized it could be a new story. Coughing heavily, the man realized that this was happening more and more often, and there was no way he could resist it. The man didn't know when it started, but he had pain in his head while exercising. It's dangerous because he can't get rid of it. Rebidin realized he was not recovering while he rested, suggesting that he had an inner enemy he had not yet faced, calling it a mind demon. Suddenly, Kaloi, the man, entered. The Lord allowed him to pass, bowing. He was ready to begin his report. Kaloi apologized to the Lord for disturbing him during the training session, saying that Rabadon immediately needed to know about it. Rebidin asked the aide what he was talking about, and Kaloi replied that the younger son had brought the merchant Yulaf. The Lord wondered if this was something to worry about. The aide replied that it was about the man who came with them. Rebidin was surprised that his youngest son had managed to detect an Imperial spy. When everyone gathered, they saw the body of Harvester Rackle lying motionless, and were surprised at the sight. The Lord, seeing the body of the spy, assumed he was dead. He didn't fully understand what had happened. Ern apologized, saying he tried to keep him alive but failed. Rebidin replied that he did not need to apologize, asking his youngest son to go and heal. Ern replied that he was fine. The Lord asked his son to explain what had happened. He was anxious to know the details. Ern introduced the mana stone seller he was familiar with to his father, calling him Yulaf. Rebidin replied that he had heard about this vendor from Warden Kaloi and was not surprised by this encounter. Ern reported that he went to Lahit to meet Yulaf and explained his situation to him. The two of them left, saying that something was wrong. The guy suggested that it was very strange to follow a merchant, and then he lured the spy to a quiet place and asked who he was. Ern reported that the spy drew his sword and tried to attack him. The father asked his youngest son how he knew this knight was a spy. Ern pulled out a letter in response. The lad asked the butler to give his father this letter he had found, and the servant obediently obeyed his orders. After reading the contents, the Lord announced that he believed everything his son said, stating he was a spy. Kieran shouted out from the crowd and asked what it said, showing with his whole demeanor that he didn't trust his little brother. My father said that some kind of code was written there because the Imperial Information Department often did it, and he said that he had seen it a couple of times. Kieran put forward the theory that if it's just a copy of the message, Ern is trying to trick them. The Lord assumed he didn't want this sent to the Empire, so he looked thoughtfully at his eldest son. The eldest son confusedly replied that it was an Imperial problem they needed to clean up. Rebidin asked him the real reason, and Kieran answered his father's question positively. Lord stated that when something happens, and if people believe in the best at all costs, it is not always worth it to deceive the people if you are not a mere pawn. Rebidin pointed out to his eldest son that lords think differently. If there is no rain, then we must prepare for drought, for that is truly how a leader thinks. The father asked his son if he understood what he was saying to him. Kieran looked down at him and replied that he thoroughly understood the Lord's words. The Lord praised his youngest son for such a good job. Ern replied that he had accidentally caught it and should not honor him. Rebidin ordered the warden to call the doctor, but Karan looked suspiciously at his younger brother. To himself, the older brother hated the younger for his good fortune in winning his father's trust. Later, Yulaf asked the guy if he wasn't overreacting to what was going on. Ern replied that he had expected to be locked in that room for a long time, but that did not happen. Yulaf pointed out that the boy had only had a scratch and had been treated with potions, asking if he was healthy. The doctor checked the guy after every meal. Ern realized that they were really focusing on healing, although the aura wielder's regeneration rate was much faster than that of a normal person. Ern asked how long it would last, for it was a very pitiful sight to him. Yulaf asked Ern if it was not bad. The guy, in response, suggested to the interlocutor that he look at himself in the mirror. The guy replied that he had told him to keep that mask on, but now he had decided to take it off his face. Ern asked his buddy what his father had said, deciding that something suspicious might happen. The guy replied that the Lord was asking the usual things. The guy thought the Lord didn't care about Yulaf because of the spy. A friend pointed out that this mask is not badly made because even the Lord they managed to fool could say that he was wearing a wig because of the scar. Ern asked his buddy to take care of this mask since he couldn't create the same face again. The guy asked why this. The guy replied to his buddy that a similar face could not be found, so they would have to come up with something else. Suddenly, the guy thought about Ern's words since they couldn't find a similar mask. The guy, immersed in his worries, unknowingly dropped that mask. He was shocked. Ern asked him to take care of this mask, as it was his only chance of salvation. The boy was shocked at the words he heard. The boy thought Ern's skills and abilities were incredible, because he had no idea where he had acquired them all. After thinking for a bit, the guy decided to ask Ern why he was hiding his abilities from the outside world. Ern retorted by asking what good it would do if he started showing off his skills to everyone, stating that he was only a 5th grader and people were already uncomfortable. The guy pointed out that there is a limit to the length of a chisel that can be used to chisel out a blocked stone, and in his class it would just break. Suddenly, the guy claimed to be a descendant of Rebahan and a true steel guard. The guy was sure no one would object to Ern even if he told everyone about his skills. Ern ordered his interlocutor to stop sassing him, and he was surprised to feel his aura. The guy suggested that he wanted him to become a walking billboard and attract the attention of the Harvest Duracle Empire, but he replied that he didn't mean it. Showing the bug flask, Ern stated that it was still in his grasp, not the Imperial guy's. The guy was surprised at such a threat. Ern cheerfully asked Harvest Duracle if he wanted to take that flask of hooch in from him. Harvest Duracle assumed that Ern couldn't fool him twice with an innocent grub, so he answered that it wasn't what he thought it was, indicating that he wouldn't ask such questions again. Ern asked the guy to look at the report he had written earlier, and he handed him the sheet, as requested. The report said that Rebirth Stilgard kept hiding his rank, which was hard for him to say. Kieran Stilgard was described as a normal bearer of a second-class name, with the potential for first-class ill will. The report described Jason Stilgard as a normal 3rd or 4th-class host. A spy was trying to study his body. Ern learned from the report that he's an absolute 0 with no sign of advancement. The spy in the report assumed he was incapable. After Ern had read that, there were a couple of changes in the information about the communications manager Gilbert, who had died, and Harvest Duracle was still trying to figure out the real reason for his death. Ern reported that the report was okay, but to call him incapable is a little wrong. He felt the report was a little biased, and it pissed him off. Harvest Duracle tried to explain himself by assuring that he did not want to call Ern that in the report, because he had ordered him to belittle him as much as possible in the document. Ern pointed out that he shouldn't apologize because it made him suspicious that Harvest Duracle assumed this guy was playing him. The guy told Harvest Duracle that he needed to hide a lie inside the truth, and if he was too straightforward, he could get caught. Harvest Duracle replied that, in that case, he would correct his report and write that Ern was in 6th or 7th grade. Ern asked how he would contact his superiors without a communications manager. Harvest Duracle replied that he knew an agent at Acadia. Hearing this, Ern assumed that no matter what, they would have a trip to Acadia. After that, the guy lets Harvest Duracle go, advising him to stay out of sight of the others. Ern realized that Harvest Duracle would make a good double agent. He needed to keep an eye on the Empire and find out what its plans were. The guy realized that if Duracle started working with the Empire again, he could finish him off with a bug. After his father came in to see Ern and asked how he was feeling, the boy was surprised that his father had come to see him. Ern tried to get out of bed, but the Lord pointed out that he could stay out of bed. The younger son replied that he was fine, stating that he was healthy. When his father asked if he was really all right, Ern nodded positively and assured him that it was all thanks to his care, saying that the doctors had given him a potion, so he was much better now. Rebadan was pleased to hear this, for he had already thought of postponing the trip. Ern replied that he was fine and had a long way to go anyway. When the boy thought about it, He didn't remember his father coming into his room in his past life. Ern remembered that he and his father didn't have private conversations like this and couldn't get used to it. Suddenly, the father sat down next to the boy on the bed. Ern did nothing wrong, but felt like he was being yelled at, and he didn't know what to do in such a situation. The father informed his son that the knights had found where the spy had previously stayed, indicating that they had been hiccuping all night, so more time had passed than expected. Rebidin added that the spy was masquerading as a merchant from Lahit, and said they needed to increase the number of guards and ensure no more spies existed. Ern was pleased, for unlike his previous life, his father now knew that the Empire was targeting their Stilgard family. The father pointed out that it was all thanks to Ern. The boy replied that it wasn't at all, and that he shouldn't praise him. The Lord asked his youngest son to be as careful as possible. From now on, Ern was surprised at such a request from his father. Rebidon added that Ern had done them a great favor, but that didn't mean he could let his guard down after that. The father stated that he didn't want to lose his precious youngest son to a spy. The father, Ern, knew I didn't treat him so friendly in his past life. He was a strict man with a cold heart, utterly different from who he saw now. Ern couldn't believe that it was really the same person he knew. Suddenly, an unconventional thought crossed his mind. The future of everyone in the family and the collapse of the Stilgard's Ern remembered the faces of everyone in his past life, but his father was not there. Ern knew that the hero's disappearance would happen 2 years later when his father disappeared while he was at the academy. His memories of him were only from childhood. The boy realized that he had misunderstood his father by comparing memories from the past and present time. The father pointed out that judging by the way Ern had been behaving lately, he would be fine in the capital. Asking his youngest son to always be wary, Ern realized that it was his father who needed to be more careful. Rebidin noticed the strange look in his son's eyes and asked what was wrong, assuming that he had bumped somewhere. Ern replied that he was just listening thoughtfully to his spoken words. Ern added that he would remember all of his father's instructions, realizing that he wasn't kidding. The guy almost lets his emotions take over and tells his father everything, because if he tells everything, he can prevent the worst future. But if he tries to start this dialogue, his father will just consider him crazy. Ern decided not to tell his father anything and to change everything on his own because, this time, he had enough strength and experience. His father said that since his youngest son wanted to look around a bit, he had an hour of free time. Ern thanked his father for that. Ern was pleased that he could finally access the family's inner secret vault, but he could actually get there anyway because his father wanted to reward him for his achievements and for entering the academy. The father asked his son what he liked so much about the secret vault, pointing out that if he needed an allowance, he could just ask him for it. Ern wondered why his father looked so disappointed, considering that if the Knights of Navarro were given the same opportunity, they would all ask for only one thing. All of them would ask to be trained knights of heroic rank, but Ern didn't ask for that. Ern looked at his father and assumed that he wanted him to ask him that and was asking him for time to walk around the secret vault. The youngest son said he didn't want the gold, he just wanted to see what was there. The guy knew everything from his past life, and it felt like everything he told his father was a lie. His father replied that he dared not detain him any longer, and Ern apologized to his father for his deception. The father said he would wait for his son outside, advising him to look around, and Ern replied that he would be on time. Left to himself, the boy was satisfied that he could examine the vault he hadn't been in for so long. Opening the doors, the man stated that it had been a while since he had been there, and that he was ready to continue exploring the rooms of this vault. Ern knew that the outer secret vault contained mostly emergency supplies that could be used at any time, while the inner vault was packed with rare, unique items. The guy realized that just because these rare items were rare didn't mean they were expensive, indicating he needed to give them something like this. The commander's shield is a magical shield given to the family by the king. It is said to be enchanted with morale-boosting magic to maintain the spirit of an entire army. The guy didn't understand why a knight of mythical rank would need such a shield, since even a legendary or heroic rank wouldn't use one. Looking to the side, Ern remembered that the king who granted such a thing had ulterior motives, assuming that the Stilgard family was the king's shield rather than a sword. Ern realized that grandfather had visited this shield in the vault when the king's motives were revealed. After they won the war, his grandfather could do anything he wanted because he was a knight of mythical rank who supported society and could take over the kingdom if he wanted to. The guy knew that despite all the titles and other honors he had received from the king, those honors weren't even close to his accomplishments. Ern said they could not sell such rewards, for it was a gift from the king himself, but he knew there were real treasures here. When he came to the table, he noticed that his grandfather's equipment was there, with the help of which he won the war. The best part of this outfit was his grandfather's fellow sword, which bore the name Dark Sky. Suddenly, Ern thought of putting this sword in his inventory, but realized that it would be disrespectful to him, because his inventory was only level 1. However, he wanted to upgrade it anyway. The cost of upgrading his inventory was 200 coins. Ern remembered that he had managed to earn a good amount of money from the last exchanges, so 200 coins seemed like a small thing to him. After the upgrade, the system reported that the next inventory level upgrade would cost 500 coins. Ern pointed out that it wasn't a problem and upgraded to level 3. Unexpectedly, the system's next message shocked the guy because the increase to the 4th level already cost 1,200 coins. The guy realized that he had such a large amount of coins. Still, he hesitated whether to spend them so thoughtlessly to raise the inventory level that he decided to stay at the 3rd level. Ern pointed out that the 3rd level inventory looked cheap compared to the coins he had spent, and he needed another 1,000 coins to set up here. Picking up his grandfather's sword, he indicated that he would just check something out if he put it in his inventory and looked at its characteristics. Having performed this action, the guy was satisfied because his theory was confirmed. It was written that this is a great sword containing in itself the spirit and perseverance of the master. Taking the sword back, Ern realized that it was different from the swords of this system. Since his grandfather was good at martial arts, he assumed his equipment was not from the first system. The guy stated that the Dark Sky sword had been with his grandfather since he was a child, which meant that he had originally participated in spatial trading. After returning the sword, testing his theory, and quenching his curiosity, he was satisfied, but didn't want to take it out of the family vault. Suddenly, Ern realized that he had limited time to settle here and shouldn't waste time being curious. After all, he came to find the book of measurement deals that were supposed to be here. The boy knew that from the Earth of 1,342, there must be only one spatial merchant. If this book falls into the hands of his loved ones, he may repeat the mistakes of his past life. Ern realized that he had to get this book first to avoid making the same mistakes. Walking over to the shelves, the guy assumed she must be there somewhere, but she was nowhere to be found, which seemed very strange. Ern decided to search the place, thinking that the book was in an old place, according to memories from the past. He looked on the shelf where it should have been, but it was not there. Looking under the closet, the guy noticed something strange lying too far away. He decided to grab this object, making a few awkward movements, but he managed to grab it. Pulling an object out from under the cabinet, the guy realized it wasn't too big, not understanding how it could have been there. Ern managed to get an ostrich egg, which was black for some reason. The guy didn't understand how it could have ended under the cabinet. Ern realized that by feeling this egg was like a metal egg. Ernie didn't know what it was because it wasn't his thing, so he decided to leave it where he found it and throw it back. Having performed this action, Ern realized that in any case, it only confirmed the book of transactions of measurements, not in the inner vault. All the guys had to do was figure out how he got to the past and start interacting with the spatial exchange system without the book. After Ern returned to this world, he could think of only one possible explanation for what had happened. He tried to remember what he had wished for before he died, thinking it was a wish bookmark. What had happened in his past life was so vague that the guy couldn't remember exactly what he wished for, assuming he had asked for another chance and wanted to monopolize spatial trade. Ern realized that the bookmark only gave him one wish when he thought about it, but he couldn't put together a picture of what had happened. The guy realized that he wouldn't be able to come up with anything about it anyway, as there was no other book in this vault. Ern realized that it would be a bad idea if he left her here, unknowingly deciding that he would take something else instead. Going back and looking through the shelves, Ern tried to find something helpful to take with him since his father had only given the limit for a while. Walking past the sword, Ern stopped and wondered if he should take it for himself, or if he didn't need it yet. The boy was still deeply involved in his thoughts about this Dark Sky sword that his grandfather had wielded. After realizing he had so much time, the guy finally gave up on that sword. Ern realized that there were many magical items in this vault, and while they had previously seemed incredible to him, he didn't need them now. Passing by the shelves of books, Ern suggested that he pick up his grandfather's old records. Suddenly, the black egg he had found earlier rolled out to him again. Didn't understand how it had ended up in this place again. Picking up the egg, the guy remembered that he had definitely shoved it back under the cabinet, seeing that it had no legs and couldn't move. Realized that this inner vault was the personal vault of the grandfather of the greatest spatial merchant's personal vault, and strange things couldn't happen there. Looking closely at the egg again, realized it was from another dimension. Decided to examine it and see what would happen if he put it in his inventory to verify the information. A window appeared, reporting that it was just a system balloon with unknown features. Pointed out that with such successes, it was possible to show nothing at all. Was surprised that the system didn't want to show information at the first level, because if most basic information services don't work, it means the information is from a higher dimension. The guy pointed out that this ball is not from the second or third system, deciding how to deal with it. Decided to activate his visionary eye skill, and he was surprised at what he saw. Memories surfaced in front of the boy, and he remembered this day very well as his first day at the academy. This day was like a holiday. Didn't hear the insulting words of the people around him, who didn't understand why this guy had entered the academy. Everyone who saw the guy off asked him to take care of himself and not to hurt himself out there. The guy thanked everyone for their concern. He was curious what he would have thought of all this in his past life. A couple of weeks ago, was the one everyone avoided, and now, in the present tense, he is the last hope of the Steelguard family. Karen approached her younger brother and asked him if he was happy about his departure. The boy was surprised that he would be there for 4 years. Replied that she was right, but that he would try to go home for vacation. The older sister asked to text her when he got to the academy, and the guy was okay with that suggestion. Karen instructed her brother to remember to eat well, to always wash his food well, and not to throw away his laundry. Was shocked by this admonition from his sister. My sister knew my brother would be fine, but she couldn't stop worrying about him, assuming it was because he was the youngest child in their family. Karen asked her brother to give her a hand. Was surprised at such a request from his sister, but obediently extended his hand to her. The boy received a bag of coins from his older sister. He was surprised at such a presentation to Karen. Karen reported that it was a small gift. Asked why he needed the money at the academy. Big sister had heard from Kieran that money could be useful at the academy, so she gave it to him. Replied that he didn't need to do that, assuring that he had a good allowance. If he exchanged all his coins for gold, he could hire a group of knights. The younger brother thanked his sister, promising to spend the money well. Karen replied that there was no need to thank her, and suddenly, the boy wondered where his sister got the money from. Noticed that her ruby pendant, which she always wore, was missing, realizing that she had sold it for him. The guy assumed this pendant didn't belong to their mother and wasn't passed down from generation to generation. Even so, realized how much his older sister valued her pendant and was sorry she had sold it. The guy assumed Karen was feeling the pressure and decided to give him such a gift before he left. The Steelguard family was without a mistress, and older sister Karen was replacing all the children with their mother. Assumed she couldn't help but feel she had to. Realized that it must be his feeling, not hers. He sat alone in the carriage and mused on the subject. Afterward, the guy realized he had no time to grieve because he had to be more ready than ever before he left. Decided to enter the first system of trade. He received 30 coins from Seok-hyun. The guy was surprised at Seok-hyun's indication that he wasn't kidding. The scammer asked the guy what he was talking about. Indicated that he had told him there was no time and asked him to get Seok-hyun out as soon as possible. Seok-hyun replied that he was working on it. The guy replied that he was sure he was working on it, suggesting that he was ecstatic about the request. Asked Chun-heng if he had found a useful person, as he had asked. The man was surprised at such words. Chun-heng pointed out that it was a misunderstanding and an automatic exchange. Asked what scammer such as this use, assuming he wants to screw him over. The guy said there would be new interest rates -1% and 2%, and Chun-heng asked to stop. Chun-heng pointed out that he had suddenly received a call from a customer. But that didn't mean he had forgotten about Ern's words, because he had been watching him while he was doing the register. Ern was sure he'd told him that already. He assumed this crook was trying to keep fooling him. The guy angrily added that Chun-heng wasn't trying to trick him because he would immediately throw a complaint against him to the librarian. After Ern changed the interest rates, he pointed out that if he told him to do something, then he should forget about everything and perform it. Chun-hen apologized and said he would immediately check everything and contact him afterward. Earn knew this manipulation would work because the exchange center guarantees contracts between dimensions. In exchange for protecting and keeping Hyun's secret, a secret service contract was applied, which required him to obey his orders and give 80% of the profits. Chun-heng had already enjoyed the luxury and fun, and even if he had taken away 80% of his profits, he would not stop selling because the expected salary would no longer satisfy him. Earn realized Chun-hyun was already like a melting candy, saying she would milk him forever. Unexpectedly, Seok-hyun said that he had gotten Earn pointed out that it didn't take him that long. The guy decided to see what he found. It was Evangeline's breathing technique. Earn didn't understand why the explanation of this technique ended, so he used the Eye of Providence. He failed to find additional information suggesting this technique's description is accurate. Earn replied that Chun-heng had found it, but it wasn't exactly what they needed. Even if she was a swordmaster on Earth, it couldn't be said that everything worked properly. Chun-heng replied that he too had studied this book, pointing out that Earn had said that the person he needed was a third-level person. Earn angrily asked the rogue who he was calling third level. Chun-heng replied that the third level would not be enough if one could not use sword ki. The guy asked him to shut up, stating that it was his inner third-level energy. The man didn't realize who was to blame. Chun-heng decided to bear with it because he couldn't risk his life for it, and replied that this was the ultimate martial art theoretically. Earn asked the rogue what about stability, since that was the most essential thing in their case. Chun-heng replied that she was pliable and delicate, so the risk of internal wounds was low. The seller said he had barely gotten the book when he wrote to his friends, assuring them that it would be hard to find anything better now. Earn asked if that was true. Seok-hyun answered affirmatively when asked why zero-system art was important, because if he needed methods to study internal energy for women, he had a couple. Earn replied that it was not his business to ask how things were with the others, since that was not his only request. Chun-heng replied that he was still waiting. He had managed to find the sellers, but they had not answered him yet. The guy asked Chun-heng to direct these salesmen to him after they gave their answers. Chun-heng replied that he understood everything, and tried negotiating with the guy to return the previous interest rates. Still, Earn said nothing, and left the chat with him. Earn was pleased that he had spared this rogue because it was helpful to him. He decided to look at the book Chun-heng had taken out. After reading a few pages, the guy realized that it was a good book about martial arts. In addition, it was perfectly translated into their language. In that case, Earn decided to give this book to his older sister, who was surprised at such a gift from her brother. The younger brother stated that the book would be more useful to her. Karen asked that he take the book out of her, assuring her that he shouldn't have done that. The guy replied that it may seem strange now, but he was giving this book to her for a reason. Karen asked what reason he was talking about. Earn replied that she would know that reason when she read it, and he would appreciate it if Karen read the book in full. The older sister thanked her brother. The guy knew his older sister had talent, and he realized she was better than the old man. Earn realized that if his sister learned Iron Breath, their Steelguard family might not fall, but he could not be sure, for it was challenging to become a special knight. His brother was sure that his sister would not miss the chance to nurture her talent for the good of their family. Martial arts, first system, or higher mana stones Earn could give her if she wanted it, realizing that now was not the time for it. Now, after all this, he was ready. Suddenly, he remembered something he thought was important. Before leaving, Earn indicated to Darien that he was leaving but would not stop watching what was going on. Earn asked Darien not to fool around and interfere in the serious trade affairs of the Steelguard family. Going to the academy in a past life was a road to hell, but now a lot has changed. Earn realized that in this life he had a good relationship with people who hated him in the past and positive views of those around him. This was what was most unlike his past life, for now he had plenty of experience. The guy realized that this would create even more differences in the future. Chun-heng told Earn that the sellers he was looking for had answered him. Earn replied that it was very timely to ask if they sell. Chun-heng positively responded by suggesting that Earn discuss the details with them. The guy didn't mind contacting the seller, Seok-hyun, and asked Earn to wait a while. Earn was pleased because, finally, he would start to find out something. He took out the black egg he had found in the secret vault. The Bulgasari egg is incredibly weak at birth, but grows into an uncontrollable metal-eating beast. The adult Bulgasari is so powerful that it can cause a natural disaster. Earn realized that the egg could hatch into a natural disaster, and he could not believe such a creature could be in such an egg. Chun Heng gave the guy the contact information of the salesman, Henry Earn, and indicated that he would call him later if necessary, asking him to wait. Earn noticed that Henry was from the fourth system, Callisto. He thought it odd that this salesman was in the channel of the first system. The exchange center provided Earn with a report indicating that Henry was a 3,827th rank warrior who participated in competitions, was obsessed with championships, and gambled away all his winnings. Earn contacted Henry, saying he wanted to buy a taming guide from him. The seller saw that the buyer was from the first system. The guy asked the salesman if he could see the item, and Henry replied that he would show him the manual listing the tricks and gimmicks of the Grand Buit Beast Emperor. Upon seeing this technique, Earn replied that he was confirming the purchase and wanted to buy part 215. Ask Henry what he didn't hear because he told his slave Chun Hyun that he couldn't sell that part. Earn asked what the seller wanted to sell all 14 at once, and Henry answered in the affirmative, saying it would cost 2,000 coins. The boy was shocked at the price, assuming Henry wanted him to give him 2,000 coins for an egg hatching allowance. Earn replied to the seller that he would not agree to such a price. Henry assured the buyer that this book made the Emperor of Beasts so assured that this price was relatively low for such a manual. Earn responded by asking the seller not to lie to him, pointing out that she had not made him like this, for she had been written after he had become emperor. The fellow offered Henry 150 coins for the 215th part, stating that he was given 8 more coins. Henry asked the buyer to use common sense when trading, because a complete collection of 666 pieces is worth over 300,000 coins. The seller asked the buyer if he didn't see a pattern after all 14 chapters in a row were premium items. Earn pondered Henry's words about whether he could find this book in the first system, realizing that he could not find one here. The guy realized that didn't mean the salesman could push him around any way he wanted by raising the price. Earn offered to sell Henry a copy of the 215th for 100 coins, and the seller was surprised at such an offer. Henry asked how he would dare talk about a copy of such a manual, assuming that Earn wanted to use the licensed item without paying the full amount since the author had spent a lot of blood and sweat creating it. Hearing the salesman's words, Earn assumed he was on drugs, not realizing what the sudden admonitions were sprinkled about him. Copyright tags on books are managed directly by the exchange center, because if a seller is caught selling a copy with such a tag, he can be banned forever and take away all the coins. Earn seemed unsurprised after apologizing to Henry for not seeing the mark. The salesman told the guy to be careful and added a caution that they were going crazy on those tags. Earn replied that copying would not work in that case. He thought about the situation. The buyer indicated that he would then just let Henry sell him the 215th part for 200 coins, stating that this was his final offer. The guy asked the seller not to accept his offer if he disagreed and just closed the chat. Earn realized that now they would find out who was more desperate. Henry texted him a message, and the system asked the guy if he wanted to join the chat room. Henry said that 200 coins would not be enough, so he offered him a price of 250. Earn asked if he knew what the last sentence meant, indicating that he needed to think straight. The seller stated that the price would drop if the part from the middle Earn asked what he wouldn't sell to him. Earn managed to talk the seller into selling to him by asking him to throw him an exchange window, just as the guy suspected. The fellow knew Henry had only 400 coins and how desperate he was to come to the first system, assuming he was trying to raise the money he had lost at gambling. Earn wanted to see if the Emperor knew that Bulgasari, a well-trained werewolf, could reach the national level. The guy realized he had thoughtlessly dragged the egg with him but didn't expect much. He assumed it was planet level. After this assumption, he felt scared and didn't know how to behave appropriately with this egg. After the absorption was completed, the system reported that the evil beast here was not used on Bulgaria's 215th. Earn realized that there was a reason he was called a Beast Emperor. Brooding only began when day and night's methods of raising him differed. Earn realized that it was almost impossible to raise him in the former system. The guy knew that since Bulgasari is an imperfect organism, breeding it would require the genetic information of another organism, such as saliva, mucus, or other bodily secretions, like blood. The most important thing in the beginning was the potential to make it bigger. To do this, you need powerful genetic information as a basis. The guy thought about the fact that he needed a strong organism for genetic information. Beasts existed even in the first system, and martial arts users here called them spirits. Not a single particle was wasted, and it was evident they were actively sold in the store. Ern recognized that the description of the order was so human, earthly, and heavenly that the heavenly guy didn't know what to take. Suddenly, Ern remembered that he had Chun-Hen to help him. He asked him if he knew about Chun-Hen's spirits and asked him what he needed. Chun-Hen was surprised at Ern's suggestion and indicated that he wouldn't force him to tame any beast without internal cultivation. After all, he wasn't that stupid. When the guy asked Chun-Hen what he knew about it, the man replied that he knew as much as anyone else. Ern sent the man a file asking him to assess their combat power, assuming that good healing skills did not mean high strength. Chun-Hen replied that the guy had compiled a good list, confirming that healing skills and combat power were unrelated. The blood of the 10,000 Iron Mouth was good for nurturing, but in the end, it was just an old turtle. Chun-Hen pointed out that it was much harder to compare the blood of a bloodfire dragon with the bile of a 1,000-year-old bear. Ern asked which would be better. The man replied that a bloody fire dragon becomes only a serpent trained for thousands of years. However, it should be practiced because a dragon is a dragon. After Ern learned that the big bear was no match for him, after asking how art users hunt such beasts, Chun-Hen replied that incredible people live here. Ern thanked the man for his help, but Chun-Hen asked the guy to wait. Ern asked what was wrong. Chun-Hen replied that he had bought Evangeline's breath with his coins, though they still contracted him. Interrupting the man, the guy asked what had hit his wallet. Chun-Hen replied that he didn't mean it. Ern asked how much Evangeline's breath cost, and Chun-Hen replied that he bought it for 300 coins. The guy wondered how much it cost. Chun-Hen replied that he was in a hurry and couldn't bargain with the seller. After thinking for a bit, Ern asked if he was lying. This time, he had already used flow recognition to check the price. Chun-Hen pointed out that he wouldn't have lied to him under threat of death because Ern wouldn't have bought it anyway. Ern decided to reward Chun-Hen for his honesty. He swapped the interest rates between their trades, which amounted to 20%. The guy then said he would call him if he needed him, asking him to be in touch, and if he didn't answer within 10 minutes, he would issue him a warning. The guy decided to use the bloody fire dragon before buying it from one of the customers. Ern doubted whether the elixir he had bought would work since the egg had been in storage for 10 years. The boy dripped a single drop of elixir, and it immediately evaporated. Ern assumed he was pouring it as if on a hot pan. Suddenly the egg reacted. Ern realized that he wasn't just called a beast, realizing this creature was alive after so many years of oblivion. The guy was curious to know how this egg got into his grandfather's vault, assuming he was trading with someone from the fourth system. Egg continued to react. Ern was glad everything was going well because he feared he might not like someone else's blood. Sitting next to the egg, the guy realized he only had to wait for his caravan to continue to the academy. Gathering his thoughts, Ern began to meditate in anticipation of arriving at the academy. Suddenly there was a crunching sound, and the guy saw that the egg was moving and assumed that the hatching had already begun. Indeed, the egg began to crack, and from there it gradually began to climb out, unknown to the guy beast. The infamous shapeshifter from the fourth system in planetary level theory is a living Budstvite Bulgasari. Ern was shocked by such a cutie that came out of the egg, but the beast didn't realize what had happened or where he was. The guy assumed that something had gone wrong because he had hatched early and didn't know this little guy was a normal animal. The beast let out its cute growl. Ern realized that there was no difference and he fell in love with his new pet. The guy read a manual on raising pets afterward and made a cut in his hand. Since the Bulgasari had no mammary glands, they fed the babies blood instead of milk. Bulgasari children have memorized the taste of blood, treat the human species as their own, and follow the owner of the blood like a mother. Aggressive behavior disappears after this, but feeding them their blood is best for easier control. The beast was drinking blood very actively. Ern became uncomfortable and asked it to stop. The guy stated to his pet that he could die from blood loss. He realized he needed to find a way to feed him before he sucked all the blood out of him. Afterward, Ern realized that he needed to give the little pet a name, since it would follow him everywhere. Ern couldn't decide on a name, trying to match something related to Bulgaria. When the guy asked the pet what his name was, sorry, the pet was surprised at the name and showed a look that he didn't like it. Harvest Oracle noticed the young gentleman asked him what happened to his arm and began worrying about him. Ern replied that everything was fine and there was no reason to worry. He bandaged his wound and fed his pet. The servant pointed out that it wasn't normal because he was bleeding from his wound. Ern pointed out that he was bored in the carriage, and after playing with the sword, there was such a mishap. Harvest Oracle replied that he didn't believe him because after he demonstrated his fundamental skills, He couldn't think he could hurt himself with a sword. Ern realized that he had to do better than that. Duracle didn't know what Ern was up to when he asked him to be more careful because he was responsible for his safety. The young gentleman asked what they had stopped for to eat. Harvest Duracle answered positively, stating that after a snack they would continue until sunset. Harvest Duracle asked Ern to bring him something, and the boy asked him to bring food to the carriage. Suddenly, the guard noticed something suspicious in the bushes and tried to draw his sword, but Ern stopped him and told him not to be so adamant. Ern replied that it was fine. Harvest Duracle did not understand the behavior of the young master. Suddenly, a cute little beast jumped into Ern's hands. The guard was surprised by such a thing. Harvest Duracle asked the gentleman what kind of animal it was, assuming it was a weasel. Ern replied that it was his new pet. The beast was attached by feelings to its master, who had managed to hatch it from a magical egg. Duracle asked when his master had had a pet. Ern replied that it had been quite a while. Ern asked that Harvest Duracle was not interested in him or aware of his affairs. The guy pointed out that Duracle had followed him diligently and failed to notice that he had gotten himself a pet. Ern asked Sari to say hello to Harvest Duracle, and the guy asked if he could pet him. The guy decided to check something out and let Duracle pet his cute pet. Harvest Duracle tried to pet the animal, pointing out that it was very cute. When Sari touched it too, he looked at him angrily. The guy thought the beast hated him and stopped touching it to avoid dire consequences. Ern asked what Duracle expected his stroking of Sari to make her tail wag, indicating that he had almost pointed a sword at him earlier. The guard said he would bring Ern food as soon as it was ready. Bulgaria is a ferocious beast that grows stronger by eating metal and can take other forms. It can be helpful but dangerous if Ern doesn't control it. If he doesn't, he can't keep it around when he gets angry. The boy realized that the blood feeding had been worth it. They were both happy because they had become friends. Based on the Emperor's theory, Bulgasari's potential power is the strength and energy of the body given as a child, so it was written. Ern solved the first part of the equation when he chose a blood-fire dragon to solve the next, and he needed strong energy sources. The problem was that these sources of power were damn expensive. Ern decided to feed his pet. Ern couldn't hold back his tears because he had given his pet a bamboo pill of life, which the leader of the mountain bamboo sect had given him. One such pill was worth 150 coins. The guy realized that even though he was selling cheap stuff, he still wouldn't have enough, realizing he needed to act again. 53 days were left before the mana stone limit reset, and he needed to choose the following product. Ern tried to decide what he should sell, realizing that it should be desirable to everyone in the first system with a large margin of maintaining balance. The base price must be high to make a big profit, so he started looking for the perfect object in his memories. The internal nurture sold well, as it was desired by everyone in the first system, and could be bought for a tidy sum of coins, the numbers showing the quality of the nurture. Ern realized that due to skills, even if one bought for 250 coins and resold it, one would get 58.5 coins on top. If he just resold it like that, he could make thousands. He couldn't even imagine how much he could get. The guy understood that the exchange center would not allow him to do such a thing because the sale of this item was restricted. Ern couldn't wait because he would have to wait more than a year to sell his internal nurturing. After being rewarded with 1,000 coins for the achievement, he decided to increase his reach by buying the next item, Elixir. The guy started buying Centennial Polygonum roots, which are rainbow dazzling fruit roots, black ginseng summoning pills, and a lot more. Everyone's Elixir category was different, so sales were not limited, which meant that Ern just had to prepare to earn coins. Ern asked Sari to open her mouth since he had bought many useful elixirs for him. After eating a few of them, the guy noticed that his pet had developed small fangs. He realized that these elixirs worked. Sari, for the last few days of the road, has changed a lot. The color of the Bulgari's fur depended on the creature of the first blood. When the beast grows, its fangs and fur completely change. In this case, the baby stage ends. Now that he had reached his limit, feeding him elixirs no longer made sense. Ern realized that the coin eater stage was over. 30% of his profits were reinvested in the exchange, 50% went to Sari, and the other 20% went to internal nurturing and other items Ern needed. Ern's most used item was the second round of Daylight Healing Magic. The guy often used this scroll, and at this moment, he also decided to use it by tearing it apart. Ern suggested that if breathing ki is good for the soul, then nothing is better for cleansing the outside. The guy used to be called the star of the Navarro community, though not for as long as he would have liked. When the guy realized that looks are also a strength, He decided to do everything in this life to look good. Suddenly, the guy was approached by Michael Ern and asked the knight what was wrong. Michael informed his young master that it was still half a day's ride to the academy, and Sir Havis asked him to tell him if they needed a break. Ern replied that everything was in order and asked him to tell Havis to keep moving, promising they would rest when they arrived. The guy realized that time flies very fast for the trades because half of the day had passed, and he hadn't even noticed her. Ern decided to continue making deals before arriving at the academy because he still needed a lot of money. Meanwhile, in the second town of Navarro Acadio, the guys opened their mouths and were shocked to see where they would be sleeping. Harvest Oracle asked Ern that it wasn't too expensive for a servant's resting place. Ern replied that these guys had come a long way from behind them. Duracle pointed out that this was a famous inn in Acadia. The young lord indicated that his guards needed to rest and asked Sir Havis to watch over them. The boy asked what people would think of the steel guards when they saw them, and Ern asked the aide to take them to wash up. Ern handed Harvest Duracle 200 coins, indicating that he could use all of them. The boy was surprised at the young lord's generosity. The guy asked what was enough for everyone, such as a hot bath and expensive food, and the aide replied that he had given him more than was required. Ern pointed that out there, and is thanked for pointing out that everyone else should enjoy it too. The guy said they weren't here to play after all and asked how things were going with the venue. Harvest Duracle replied that he had left a mark near the castle walls, and they were to contact them after noticing it. Ern praised him for doing such a good job, realizing they had to wait until they were contacted. A little later, Ern's guards rejoiced at the banquet the young lord had arranged for them. The knights noticed Harvest Duracle approaching him and asked what they were doing there. The lads offered to share a drink with their captain, but to their regret, the captain replied negatively. The knights pointed out that it wasn't like him to try the local booze either. The captain replied that he couldn't join them. Looking at Ern, the captain asked if he could have one drink, hoping he would let him. Ern grimly replied that he could drink if he wanted to go to the other world immediately. The captain replied that he couldn't drink this time, asking to be left alone. The guys didn't understand why he decided to refuse even a drink. Harvest Oracle pointed out that one glass would turn into two and two into three, and so on, saying that they could not fool the captain so easily. The knights pointed out that if he changed his mind, he could join them at any time, adding that there might not be enough booze afterward. The captain was ashamed to hear the knights say such things, but he could not risk his life for liquor. Suddenly, the waitress caught the captain's eye after she apologized to him for the guy asking her to be careful because she could hurt herself. Aaron asked Havis, who sat beside him, if he hadn't lost what he was giving him. Havis asked in response who he thought he was, stating that he only hiccuped because he was surprised. The guy said it was the first time he'd ever seen someone deliberately hit him, and he pulled an obscure piece of paper out of his pocket that the waitress handed him. Leaving the restaurant, Havis indicated that they memorized the map and divided the city into parts because that's what the note said. Havis pointed out that the letter T stands for the name Trevor, which is the man he had earlier told Ern. When the guy asked if everything was going according to plan, Harvest Oracle replied that everything was fine. Harvest Oracle added that it was an agent he had worked with before, and thought it would go smoothly this time because he would go to him immediately. Ern asked if he wanted to go to him alone. Havis nodded positively, explaining that that was the way it always was. The guy suggested that they go to the meeting place together, and he would hide there afterward. The captain replied that they could do that, but there were too many eyes in the academy, and if anyone saw them in the place, it would be a failure. After realizing Havis's words, Ern realized he was right, and the problem was that he might not return after this meeting. The young lord realized that although they had become close while traveling, he should not trust Havis. Ern asked Harvest Oracle to show him his progress report. The interlocutor told the guy that he didn't trust him since he asked to see it. The guy asked to be understood correctly, stating that there could not be anything resembling trust between them. Havis gave him his report. Reading the report, Ern was convinced that Havis had not lied to him, for he had changed the part as he had asked earlier. Havis indicated to the lad that if he was done with his reading, he could search him, saying that he could give him a copy of his report. He was trying in every way to gain Ern's confidence. Aaron asked why Havis offended him, and replied that he wouldn't dare do such a thing for he knows his place, he was told. Havis added that his life was essential to him because he didn't want to go through that hell again because of some suspicions about him. Ern gave him back the report, indicating that he could be free, and that he would not search him in an attempt to demonstrate his trust in him. Harvest Oracle bowed to the young master and told him he would return soon. Ern decided not to go to the academy with him. Ern didn't understand whether Javis was trustworthy because it was always challenging to understand someone's real intentions. He prepared a process for Ern to go through because if Javis found out his secret, it would be very bad. Ern used the third circle of transparency magic to apply the invisibility technique on the ground, forming a red magic seal. Gradually, the man's body began to disappear, and the magic seal itself became invisible to the surrounding eyes. This technique was better than Ern thought. He didn't know what would happen if he still used the skill to make his body light. The guy had become so secretive that he intended to follow Harvest Oracle to find out his true motives. Watching Javis Ern, I was convinced his behavior was worthy of a true pro. Harvest Oracle walked quickly and not slowly, having fully adapted to his surroundings in the shopping plaza. He did not at all feel like an outsider. Ern noticed that many people were following Harvest Oracle and realized it would be awful if he followed him. The boy continued to watch Harvest Oracle, who didn't suspect that Ern was secretly watching him. Harvest Oracle came to the indicated place and quietly knocked on the door. Ern continued to follow him. The unknown man opened the visitor's door and looked around carefully to see if he was being followed. Ern was standing on the roof of this building using the invisibility technique. He easily avoided detection and made sure that Harvest Oracle was doing everything he had told him to do earlier. After the guy decided to try out a new martial arts ability by using perception at 100 paces, he began to hear what was happening inside the room. Ern heard Harvest Oracle's voice saying hello to Trevor, who replied to Harvest that it had been a long time since he had seen him. Trevor asked his acquaintance what news he had come to him with. Oracle replied that Junior had entered the academy and he had become his bodyguard. Trevor assumed that he had done it to see him. The people around him were surprised to hear from Harvest Oracle that Gilbert had passed away, and one of the guys asked how it happened. Harvest Oracle asked how he thought, giving him a choice of assuming that Gilbert had died of illness or accident. Trevor asked when he found out about it. Harvey Oracle pointed out that it was evident since he owed him his life. The guy felt very sorry for Gilbert that he died like that, assuming he passed away when he was tortured. Trevor pointed out that the academy was in the capital and far away from Acadio. Thus, he began to suspect Harvest Oracle was trying to deceive him or hide something. Harvest Oracle looked calmly at Trevor, who was beginning to suspect him of betrayal. Ern, overhearing their conversation, assumed that something had gone wrong when he heard Harvest Oracle's question about Trevor having fun. Trevor was surprised by his acquaintance's question and did not understand what he was trying to hint at. Laughing, Trevor asked Harvest Oracle to relax, asking her not to be mad at his ridiculous joke. Trevor explained that he was sorry about what had happened to Gilbert, but they could do nothing about it now because that was their life. Ern heard that they couldn't do their jobs. If they regretted every employee's demise, Ern assumed it would go well. Trevor asked Harvest Oracle how he had gotten here since the others should not have suspected anything. He said that the journey would have taken much longer. Harvest Oracle replied that he used Ern Stilgard and mentioned the academy visit, then happily agreed. Ern, hearing Harvest Oracle call him names, made his words hurt without understanding why. Trevor found out how he managed to get to him by asking how he could help Harvest Duracla. Then, he handed him the mission progress report, asking Trevor to encrypt it and send it to the Empire. Trevor looked thoughtfully at his guest and asked what else he needed. Harvey Oracle said that was all he needed and that he didn't need anything else, then turned around and told Trevor that he was leaving. Ern had experienced the life of a spy, and it was a pity that he could not get any helpful information, for they were talking business and had already finished. Even so, Ern was pleased that Harvest Oracle had succeeded in accomplishing what he had planned, and he congratulated him mentally as he continued to watch him. Ern realized that in that case he needed to start acting. He continued to be under the invisibility technique. Suddenly, the guy heard a conversation inside. Someone asked Trevor if it was strange because the agent was alive and the contact had died. Ern realized that it was not all over. Trevor asked his assistant what the fuss was about, suggesting that Harvest Oracle may have switched sides and is now working for the enemy. The aide responded positively, adding that he was technically demoted too. Trevor replied that Harvest was not the kind of person who would betray them. Ern heard that Harvest Oracle valued his family and would rather die than cause them trouble. Trevor assumed his assistant disliked Harvest Oracle by asking or something. The assistant couldn't answer anything intelligible. Trevor ordered him to stop talking nonsense and focus on his work. Ern heard that upper management decided everything, and Trevor and his team would relay the information they received to management. Watching the departing Harvest Oracle, Ern realized he had reasons for conducting such affairs. The guy realized that invisibility and perception at 100 paces were perfect for this mission and were worth the coins spent. Ern came down from the roof and said he would use such practical techniques many more times. Suddenly, the guy overheard someone talking about social hierarchy. The second guy replied that he dared not talk about it. Ern noticed that a fight was breaking out in one of the courtyards, and he didn't understand why it was making a ruckus in the middle of the night. One of the guys asked how a standard baron's knight would dare to cross them, and the other party replied that his master was the marquis and not himself. Ern realized that his knights had gotten drunk at his fault. The knight pointed out that if it weren't for the steel guards, his powerful Marquis Albert wouldn't exist. The boy was surprised to hear the name of Marquis Albret. He had crossed paths with him in his previous life. Ern couldn't believe it was the same person, and his eyes were shocked and incomprehensible. The knight replied that he was foolish since he had hoped to socialize with uneducated northerners. The guy declared that he would show him a country slave what dignity was. He was ready for a fight. The knight ordered him not to turn back to defend the honor of the steel guards. Ern realized that a fight could not be avoided in this case. The crowd of drunken knights started moving on each other, trying to figure out who was more substantial. Suddenly, their skirmish was interrupted by a man who asked what they were doing in the middle of the night. Hearing his logos, all the guys froze, looking at him. They didn't immediately realize who was in front of them. Someone in the crowd recognized the man as the second captain, and he glared at the knights who had caused the debauch. Ern noticed him frantically panting in his head as events from his past life began to float into his mind. The guy felt like his body was tearing up. As he closed his eyes, he remembered how he had been interrogated. The second captain was the man who had taken everything from Ern in his past life, and he had never been able to forgive him for it. Ern noticed behind the back of the second captain, Kunz Albrecht, who stood quietly watching the clash of knights. The lad became furious at their encounter. Ern could not have thought he would meet Kunz Albrecht in this place. Ern managed to control his emotions, realizing that now was not the best time to get rid of him, realizing that it was impossible to get rid of Kunz Albrecht so quickly and painlessly. The boy intended to return the pain he had suffered because of him in his past life, telling himself that the hour of reckoning would soon come. The second captain approached the drunken knights, and one of them was surprised that the captain was so tall. The captain pointed out that he had told them not to make a fuss. Hearing his angry voice, all the guys were scared of what was coming. Suddenly, all the knights in one voice asked the second captain to apologize, saying that such a thing would not happen again. The second captain introduced himself to one of the knights, Captain Albert Dirac, asking him who he was and where he was from. The knight replied that their squad of steel guards Dirac asked the guy what steel guards were doing in Acadia. Suddenly, everyone was surprised to hear the voice of a man who loudly announced that he would answer the second captain's question. Dirac thought this guy was strange because his gaze was calm, but sharp as a dagger. Ern realized that second captain Dirac was surprised by his sudden appearance, assuming that this was the first time he had heard a voice caused by internal cultivation. The guy decided to intimidate Dirac anyway, so the second captain grabbed his sword, seeing that the guy was approaching him. Seeing the kid, the second captain never ceased to be amazed when he asked him who he was. The guy introduced himself as Ern Stilgard. The people around him were surprised to hear this from the guy. Dirac couldn't think that a member of the Stilgard family was here, realizing that things could get much more complicated. Ern asked the second captain what his name was, Dirac, and the man answered him positively. Guy pointed out that Dirac was asking why they were here and why the Steel Guards couldn't be in Acadia. Dirac replied that he didn't mean it. Ern indicated he wanted to stop by on his way to the academy and was interested in Navarro's second city. Ern asked second captain Dirac why Kunz Albrecht was also in Acadia. The second captain replied that his master was there for the same reason as Ern, for young Mr. Kunz wanted to rest. Dirac added that he wanted to apologize for the past turmoil between them. Suddenly, young Mr. Kunz Albrecht intervened in their conversation and pointed out that Dirac had nothing to apologize to Ern for. Kunz Albrecht asked his bodyguard why he should apologize, stating that the Stilgard family caused all the trouble. The Stilgard family couldn't be suppressed by the title of Marquis, and if you do that to them, there will be a backlash. Dirac knew that, and he suggested that Kunz Albrecht finish here and go back. The young gentleman replied that he did not want to return to the hotel and asked why he had to leave. Dirac indicated that there was a misunderstanding between them that they could discuss in the morning. Ern pointed out there was no point in waiting until morning since they could figure everything out. The guy asked permission to ask a question and said he didn't understand something, asking if they knew what had happened since they had just arrived. Kunz Albrecht replied that it was unimportant, saying that the Baroque was lower than the Marquis, making it clear that he was above him in status. Ern realized that this guy was saying that because his title was higher, asking that, in that case, it was his own fault. Kunz Albrecht indicated to the lad that he had gotten it right, and he wouldn't need to explain every detail for them northerners to understand. Laughing, Ern told his interlocutor that he was just talking nonsense. Kunz Albrecht was angry at this reaction. Kunz Albrecht ordered Ern to take back his words and beg his forgiveness. Ern calmly replied that he would do so if he was wrong, but he was determined to prove his interlocutor wrong. The guy turned to the knights who were yelling about the title. One of them asked what he wanted from them. Ern asked one of the knights to tell them what happened there. Knight pointed out that the steel guards started it first. They yelled at them and started a fight. Kunz Albrecht pointed out that in that case, Ern was wrong, and he should kneel before him and ask for forgiveness for his offensive words. Ern replied that there was no need to hurry, and that both sides should be heard. Then Ern asked Michael if the words of the knights of the second side were true. His subordinate hesitated to answer. Michael replied that it was true, but they were the first to start laughing at the steel guards shouting hurtful words. Ern asked what exactly he meant. Knight reported that the other side of the conflict asked how long they would milk Rebahan's accomplishments for former glory, for they behaved too proudly and thought they were someone important. Michael apologized for making a fuss, but he was not sorry for his actions, for if they were to sit lazily by and hear such things, how dare they call themselves Knights of Steel Guard? Ern asked the titular guy if Michael's words were true. The knight hesitantly replied that they were, adding in justification that they didn't directly say so. Hearing this, the second captain was horrified to realize that his squad was full of stupid guys who couldn't think ahead. Ern pointed out that it was true. Suddenly, Ern asked Michael to raise his head. The knight didn't know what to expect from his young master. Ern said he had done a great job and held no grudge against him. Michael was surprised at the guy's reaction. A guy who, as a member of the family who inherited a heart of steel, can't ignore what happened. Ern pointed out with rage and anger that the Steel Guard family's steely heart protecting Navarro Kunz Albrecht stood in incomprehension, trying to tower over him. Looking at his knights, Ern added that they would fight for the sake of those who remembered them and spill the blood of those who laughed at them. Second, Captain Dirac realized that this conflict had escalated to a new level. Kunz Albrecht was angry at the captain for keeping quiet. Ern said he would ask them again if they think they mean nothing to the country. Dirac was shocked by the guy's profound words since he was Mr. Kunz's classmate. The other captain assumed this guy used his grandfather's fame to say the standard political nonsense. However, Dirac didn't think he could stand up for himself with such elegance. His anger was matched by the strength of the family. Dirac became convinced of the reality of what real Steel Guard blood was. Ern looked at them with contempt. Kunz Albrecht tried to say something to Ern, but Dirac realized that provocation would only make the situation worse. Suddenly, the second captain landed a decisive blow on one of the guys in his night squad to end this situation. Seeing what had happened, the surrounding people were surprised by the second captain's act, Kunz Albrecht, who was silenced by such a thing. The second captain continued to criticize his squad's knights, pointing out that they had done an excellent job of defaming Albrecht's name. Having been maimed for their rash act, the knights pityingly apologized to the second captain and the others. Dirac indicated that he didn't need their apology after all, and that it was worth asking the young lord for one. Turning around, the second captain stated that they had started it all and embarrassed Mr. Albrecht. The knights continued to dutifully apologize for their actions, as the second captain had instructed them to. Watching what was happening, Ern realized that this captain was not joking, for he must have understood the hidden meaning of his speech. The guy realized that this man had created an atmosphere in which it was safe to replace mocked with provoked, and made the knights ask Kunz for forgiveness, pretending that the quarrel was only between the knights, reducing the size of the situation. Second, Captain Dirac retreated but did not ruin his reputation. Ern realized this was no ordinary man. Ern decided to keep a close eye on the second captain as much as possible so as not to cause trouble. Kunz Albrecht was angry that Ern had emerged victorious from the situation. He said he was tired of it all, and he headed to the hotel to sleep. Ern pointed out that it felt like he didn't get anything but accepted Marquis Albrecht's apology. Hearing these words, the young gentleman stopped and turned back angrily to look directly into the guy's eyes.